Hey guys, tonight we're stepping straight into a shimmering, silk-wrapped, candlelit nightmare. You're about to become a medieval princess. Sounds dreamy, right? Jewels, gowns, towers with sweeping views of misty hills? Yeah, no. Spoiler. You probably won't survive this. You might think you're getting a fairy tale, but what you're really getting is a gold-plated cage and a lifetime subscription to suffering. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and the time you're listening in the comments. I always love seeing where you all tune in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes and the canopy over your bed is embroidered with gold thread, heavy and shimmering in the early morning light. Your linens are the finest linen anyone's ever dreamed of. Your breakfast is being prepared, maybe something like honey-soaked bread, or pottage, or spiced milk. A servant brings it in on a silver tray without making eye contact. You're 10, maybe 12, and already you feel the weight of eyes on you, always watching, always evaluating. Are you pretty enough? Delicate enough? Silent enough? Because you, my friend, were born into a role, not a life. From the moment you were wrapped in lace and given a name that fits awkwardly in both Latin and your native tongue, your job has been very clear. Be desirable. Your crib was carved from imported oak. Your baby clothes were embroidered with your family's coat of arms. That wasn't affection, it was branding. From day one, your existence is political currency. You're not just a daughter, you're an asset. A walking, curtsying, etiquette-reciting treaty. And unlike your brothers, who get to stomp around in mud and learn how to stab things with swords, you're gently taught to sit, to smile, to listen, to accept. Because the moment you speak too loudly or show a flicker of intelligence or defiance, it becomes someone's problem. Maybe your nursemaid, maybe your mother, maybe later your husband, but definitely not yours. You don't own your behaviour anymore. It belongs to the throne. That shimmering dress they put on you at age 5, it weighs more than your dog. The crown you wore for portraits. It gave you a neck cramp and left a dent in your scalp that your ladies-in-waiting had to rub out with oils. You think this is indulgence. It's performance. Every move, every blink, every breath is for someone else's approval. Most likely a room full of sweating, suspicious old men in cloaks and rings who want to see if you'd make a suitable gift for their nephew in Denmark. There's no such thing as casual when you're a princess. There's ceremony in how you walk. There's ritual in how you sit. And every misstep might be noted, judged or recorded, sometimes all three. Some, monk in a corner might be scribbling in Latin about how your smile didn't reach your eyes today, and that might make it into your family's chronicle, to be studied 100 years later. Because that's what princesses are in this world. Symbols. You might live in luxury, but the price is privacy. The price is you, and heaven help you if you're too beautiful. That sounds backward, right? Shouldn't that be a good thing? Not exactly. Because if your beauty shines too brightly, it could tempt the wrong noble, or worse, a king. And the consequences of that, whether it's a whisper, an accusation, or something worse, are never his to bear. You'll be the one cloistered away, married off early, or quietly vanished from public view. Your beauty is currency, and currency always comes with strings. Meanwhile, the world outside your palace is cold, muddy, and rough. You can hear it sometimes in the distance. Street vendors shouting, oxen groaning, soldiers training. But you're not part of that world. You never will be. You're held behind thick walls, layers of silk and layers of expectation. You're given a harp when you'd rather learn to read maps. You're instructed on flower arrangements when you'd rather learn the language of the diplomats whispering at court. Curiosity is dangerous. It's unladylike, and unladylike is unacceptable. Your family loves you, in theory, but they also wouldn't hesitate to ship you off to Bavaria if it meant securing a stronger border or gaining a fleet of ships. That's not betrayal. That's duty. And they'll expect you to smile when they tell you it's time to leave. Smile when you kiss your siblings goodbye. Smile when you board the carriage that will take you across a continent to a man you've never met. Because you are, above all else, a symbol of alliance. You are silk and jewels, but also shackles and silence. And even when you're not being traded, you're being trained. Everything from how you eat to how you cry has been regulated since birth. Show too much emotion, you're dramatic. Not enough, you're cold. Ask a question, you're impertinent. Stay quiet, you're dull. It's a lose-lose game, and the rules change depending on who's watching. Your governess watches for etiquette, your father watches for usefulness, and your mother, if she survived long enough to be around, is probably just hoping you don't end up like her. And here's something odd. If you were too smart, some might whisper you were unnatural. In some corners of Europe, particularly the more paranoid courts, intellect in a woman could be seen as witchy. There are rumours of noble daughters being kept illiterate on purpose, just to make them easier to manage. No records, of course, just the kind of stuff that lives in the shadows of court halls and never quite makes it into the formal history books. But it lingers. You feel it every time someone gives you a look that says, "Don't ask that again." Meanwhile, scholars today debate whether all princesses had it this bad. Some argue that certain regions, maybe in southern France or isolated duchies in Italy, gave their royal daughters more freedom. Maybe they had access to books, or more say in who they married. But those are the exceptions, not the rule. Most of the time your life as a medieval princess is less like a fairy tale and more like very polite imprisonment. And the worst part, you're told you're lucky, that your life is charmed, that peasants would kill for a bite of your dinner or the touch of your sheets. Maybe they would. But they also get to choose who they love. They get to go outside. They get to live their lives, even if they're short and brutal. You, on the other hand, are a dream sold to others and a nightmare you don't get to wake up from. There's no such thing as a childhood when you're a medieval princess, at least not the kind with scraped knees and lazy afternoons. Forget hopscotch or hide and seek in the orchard. From the moment you can stand without wobbling, your days are carved into rigid, exhausting slices of instruction. You've basically enrolled in the Ivy League of obedience. Princess school is brutal and it never lets up. Your mornings begin at dawn, when the castle is still dark and damp with last night's chill. You're woken by a lady-in-waiting who whispers your name like it's a secret but still manages to make you feel guilty for sleeping. She helps you dress, or more accurately, she dresses you because the layers are too complex to manage alone. Linen chemise, corset, yes, even now, stockings, undergown, overdress, embroidered sleeves, and then, maybe, if you're being presented at court today, the brocade. All of it tight, itchy, and made to impress people who never smile. Then, breakfast. If you're lucky, it's warm, but more often than not, you eat it in silence while someone reads scripture aloud, as if your porridge needs a side of piety. And then it's off to your tutors, one for manners, one for Latin, one for embroidery, and probably a gloomy man who teaches you to play the lute like your husband's happiness will hinge on whether you can pluck the right tune. The nursemaid, now nearing 60, still treats you like an overgrown toddler. She was your wet nurse once, and she sees you as her life's purpose. But she's also terrifying. She'll slap the back of your hand with a rod if you drop a stitch or slouch even an inch in your seat. And posture is everything. Your back must be straight enough to balance a candle on your head. Literally. They test this. Any deviation, and you get a scolding about how the Queen of Castile could balance too. Learning to speak is easy. Learning to say only the right things? That's your new challenge. You're given a list of courtly phrases, expressions and greetings, each tailored to different ranks. Speak too familiarly to a marquis and you've just committed social treason. Forget the correct curtsy depth. That's a whole etiquette demerit. Your lessons are less about knowledge and more about avoidance. How not to offend, how not to embarrass your father, how not to seem common. And don't even think about asking why during lessons. Why do we need to know which bishop gets seated where? Because. Why do I have to learn to dance like my knees are made of glass? Because. The answer is always because. That's your whole life now. There's an unsettling thing about being a royal child. You're expected to be perfect but not autonomous. You'll be praised for intelligence you're not allowed to use, congratulated on beauty you didn't ask for, adored by strangers, but always held at arm's length. Even your own family keeps you in a kind of polite emotional quarantine. You're hugged by gloved hands, kissed on the forehead like a prize falcon. Your mother, if she's still alive and politically unblemished, is your model. Beautiful, unreadable, untouchable. You love her. You fear becoming her. Sometimes you envy the servant girls. They giggle in corners and share stolen apples, their fingers stained with berry juice instead of ink. You once tried to sit with them, to braid someone's hair or learn a song, but a stern countess yanked you away by the wrist. Princesses don't fraternize. That word hits hard. You didn't even know what it meant at the time. You just knew it felt cold and final. Another door slammed shut. You'd think a palace would be filled with warmth and chatter, but in truth, it echoes with quiet tension. Every word is calculated, every glance weighted. When other children might be learning to chase butterflies, you're being trained to recognize a sarcastic compliment hidden in courtly phrasing. How radiant your cheeks are today could mean you're sweating like a plough horse, and you'd better respond with a smile and a bow anyway. But the real kicker? You're being shaped into something you'll never fully control. Your whole education is designed for a future you don't get to choose. Your instructors don't teach you critical thinking. They don't ask for your dreams. They teach you how to endure, how to smile at a future husband's side even if you hate him, how to raise his children even if he dies in battle or drinks himself into oblivion. Your training is survival wrapped in silk, and it's not just academic. You're taught how to faint prettily if overwhelmed, because passing out dramatically is more acceptable than expressing discomfort. You're taught how to cry without ruining your face paint, how to walk like your ankles are hinged, and how to suppress a sneeze. Not kidding, public sneezing was considered vulgar. Oh, and there's the grooming. Not spa day grooming, medieval grooming. Your hair is brushed with boar bristles until your scalp tingles. You're rubbed with rose water and vinegar. Your nails are cleaned with tiny daggers. There's no toothpaste, so you chew on mint sprigs and hope for the best. And perfume? Let's just say it covers more than it complements. Personal hygiene is a battlefield, and you're losing. Even playtime, if you get any, is instructional. You might be allowed to watch falconry or embroidery contests. Maybe a court minstrel performs a ballad about a tragic queen who died nobly for her faith, and you're expected to memorize it. You're always learning, always being watched. One misstep and you could be labelled difficult, melancholic, or worst of all, unfit. Now here's your quirky fact of the night. Some princesses were given miniature thrones as children, like baby-sized chairs with gold leaf and precious stones. Supposedly cute, but also deeply unsettling. They were meant to symbolise your future authority, but in truth, you never sit in that power, you just sit near it. There's a lot of scholarly debate about whether this intense training actually benefited noble women long term. Some argue that it gave them influence, subtle, behind-the-scenes power through charm and political manoeuvring. Others say it was psychological conditioning that left many anxious, isolated, or emotionally repressed. The truth is probably both. You learn how to manipulate within your limits, but those limits are crushingly tight. And so, your days bleed into each other, lessons, bows, sighs, and sermons, and you're good at it. You're getting better. You smile when you're supposed to. You curtsy like your knees remember 100 years of ancestors. But some nights, you stare at the ceiling above your canopy bed and wonder, what if I don't want this? What if you could just not be a princess? But that thought? You never say it out loud. Here's the cold, powdered truth they don't engrave on royal portraits. Your body isn't yours. Not even a little. Not in the I don't get to pick my outfits sense, which, to be fair, you don't. But in the much deeper, much creepier sense that every part of your existence, your height, your hips, your fertility, is a public asset. Your body is the throne. Literally. You carry dynasties in your womb before you're old enough to spell dynasty. You think you're just a girl. The court sees you as a uterus wrapped in velvet. And they've been tracking your progress since your 4th birthday. Not with affection, with medical interest. The physicians, not the charming wise kind from fairy tales, but the real ones who barely wash their hands, observe your growth like farmers eyeing a calf. Is she filling out yet? How are her hips developing? Is her complexion favourable? No one asks how you feel. Feelings don't factor in. They're not part of the marriage treaty. That's what you are, a treaty in training. Your worth skyrockets or plummets depending on how close you are to becoming breeding age, which in medieval terms is whenever your body decides to betray you with its first period. You're not celebrated when it happens, no warm talks or congratulatory cake, just whispers and maybe a physician's nod of approval, like you finally met your one true destiny. From that moment on, your innocence is over. You're eligible. That word, eligible, becomes your whole identity. You're discussed in letters sent between courts, your name tossed around like a prize to be won. Some scribe somewhere is listing your assets in flowery language. Her skin is fair, her teeth well spaced, her eyes pleasing, like you're a damn show horse at auction, and you better pray you tick all the boxes. Short, that's bad. Tall, could be worse. Broad shoulders, masculine, small waist, good. Hips for childbearing, better. Any sign of a birthmark or limp, any rumours about a strange mood or a penchant for solitude, and suddenly you're unfit for alliance. Not unloved, not undesirable, politically inconvenient. Because this is all politics. Every sigh from your lungs and flutter of your lashes is weighed on the diplomatic scale. If you're from a major house, like the Capetians or the Habsburgs, your marriage could realign the map. Border disputes might dissolve if you just say, I do. Castles might change hands. Armies might stand down. And you'll be packed off with a dowry the size of a small kingdom and expected to smile about it. Now here's a twisted little fringe fact. In some courts, princesses underwent fertility inspections. Nothing invasive, at least not officially, but deeply humiliating all the same. Midwives and noblewomen would observe you for signs of readiness. It's the medieval equivalent of a talent scout poking your belly and saying, not quite ripe. Some even believed in reading your future by the shape of your hands or the colour of your urine. And while none of it was exactly scientific, the consequences were real. If they didn't like what they saw, your political stock dropped. But maybe the most disturbing part is how you start internalizing it. You look in the mirror not to see yourself, but to measure your value. Are you good enough to marry up? Are your cheeks too red? Is your voice too low? You start policing yourself. You refuse second helpings at dinner. You practice walking slower, softer, like a ghost in brocade. Because the less you there is, the more useful you become. And let's talk about silence for a moment. It's more than just polite. It's enforced. If you voice an opinion that sounds even remotely like doubt, about your suitor, your role, your life, it can be seen as rebellion, treason even. Princesses don't doubt. They obey. If you're lucky, your mother will pull you aside and explain it gently. We all do what we must. If you're not lucky, a bishop might be summoned to counsel you on obedience. That's not a talk you want to sit through. Sometimes they parade you around early. Put you on display like a tapestry with a heartbeat. You stand beside your father at court trying not to wobble in shoes you haven't grown into. A visiting noble enters, and your name is announced like a prize. Her Royal Highness, Lady of blah blah, daughter of Duke so-and-so. You curtsy, you keep your eyes low, and you feel their gaze, their appraisal. Sometimes curiosity, sometimes hunger, occasionally pity, but never respect. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about just how much autonomy royal daughters had in their marital negotiations. Some records show girls writing letters to protest their suitors. Others show women who successfully delayed or redirected matches. But these are exceptions, and most historians agree. Your consent was performative. They might ask you how you feel, but the carriage is already waiting. And here's the cruel irony. All this pressure to be fertile, beautiful, and biddable, it's piled onto you before you've even had a chance to grow up. You might still sleep with a rag doll tucked under your pillow when your father tells you the Prince of Aragon is interested. You haven't kissed anyone. You barely know how babies are made, but the contract is being drafted. You'll be sent abroad in a dress that doesn't fit, expected to win over a court that already sees you as an outsider. And what happens if you can't have children? If the stars don't align, or your body refuses to play along? Well, then it gets ugly. Your husband might seek an annulment. You might be blamed, even if it's not your fault. Or you could end up sequestered, politely removed from view, replaced by a new wife who can fulfill the contract. Because again, you are the throne, and thrones are only valuable when they produce heirs. Meanwhile, no one cares that you used to dream of becoming a healer, or that you liked painting birds with berry juice on scraps of parchment, or that you used to sneak into the kitchens just to smell the spices. That version of you, she's gone, burned up in the fire of dynastic responsibility. What's left is a girl who walks like a queen, speaks like a diplomat, and bleeds like a future. It's a beautiful spring morning when they tell you you're getting married. You're 10, maybe 11. The birds are chirping, the garden is in bloom, and you're still trying to memorize your embroidery patterns when a chamberlain clears his throat and delivers the news like it's a festival invitation. You're betrothed now. Isn't that lovely? You blink. Your needle slips. You don't even fully understand the word. Betrothed. It sounds fancy, maybe even exciting. You've heard it in songs, in poems, but in this room, with your tutor watching for your reaction, and your nursemaid tightening her lips to hide some unreadable emotion, it hits differently. You're not getting a puppy, you're not going on a holiday, you're being handed off. There's a painting of him. Not a flattering one. He's wearing armour, which suggests he doesn't need to smile. His beard is a strange orange colour and his eyes look glassy and too far apart. You stare at that painting for far too long. Is this the man you're supposed to call husband one day? The one who'll sleep next to you? Who'll be handed your dowry like it's just part of the furniture delivery? You're not even allowed to see his portrait in private. It's unveiled during a council meeting, when your father and his advisors want your approval, which is hilarious because the deal is already done. Still, they look at you as if you might have an opinion worth pretending to care about, and all you can say is, he looks noble. The room nods in satisfaction. Good girl. And here's the worst part. This isn't some spontaneous royal whim. Your betrothal has been negotiated for years. You just didn't know it. There were letters, discussions, a few gifts exchanged between courts, maybe even some land. And now that your body's showing the faintest promise of womanhood, they're sealing the deal. Never mind that you still sleep with a candle burning. Never mind that your fingers shake when you speak in front of strangers. You're officially a fiancé. You're gifted new dresses, new lessons, and a list of things you're expected to stop doing immediately. Laughing too loud, for instance. That's childish. Running in the garden. Unladylike. Eating too fast. You'll get stomach aches, and they don't want that messing up your complexion. You start to realise that this engagement isn't the beginning of something romantic. It's the beginning of your performance. The wedding might not be for another 2 years, maybe 5. Sometimes it depends on your age, sometimes on his. But you're expected to start preparing now. You learn his family history, memorise his titles, rehearse the etiquette of his court. You begin practising how to address him properly in front of servants, in front of guests in bed. Because yes, eventually, that will be your job too. And all the while, people congratulate you. The ladies in waiting smile and say how lucky you are. Some even envy you. Your mother, if she's still around and still favours you, might give you a necklace and tell you a hushed story about her own wedding. She won't cry. Crying is for commoners, but she might press your hand and say something soft like, "You'll learn to manage him," which is not the same as "you'll love him." A quirky little detail since we're in the mood. In some royal households, betrothed girls were given miniature dolls dressed in the fashion of their future court. That way, you could start imitating the foreign customs before you ever stepped foot on their soil. Imagine it, learning how to be a stranger in a strange land by playing dress-up with a doll that looks like your replacement. And let's not forget the feast. Oh yes, your betrothal is celebrated. Courtiers toast to your health. Musicians play songs in your honour, and you're expected to dance, gracefully, without sweating. All the while you're thinking, is this what joy is supposed to feel like? Because it feels more like a funeral for your freedom. You sit at the high table trying to nibble a bit of honeyed fruit while older nobles talk around you, not to you. One lord leans in and says, "Soon enough, you'll be the jewel of their crown." You smile, because that's what you've been taught to do. You don't know him. He probably has gout, but his approval matters. And while the scholars still debate whether most royal marriages were consummated immediately after the wedding or years later, the threat of that moment looms over you like a shadow. Because at some point, whether at 12 or 14 or 16, you'll be expected to lie still and let a man you barely know do what's necessary to produce an heir. If he's gentle, that's a miracle. If not, well, you'll be reminded that this is your duty. No one talks about fear, not openly, but you see it in the eyes of your older cousins, the ones who've already been sent away. You hear it in the way their voices tighten when they visit, if they're allowed to speak to you at all. One cousin came back early, quiet, thin, changed. She said she had delicate health, and no one pressed for more. but you noticed how she avoided loud noises and flinched when men raised their voices. And what if your fiancé dies before the wedding? It happens. Plague, war, hunting accidents, even assassination. Then you're back on the market. Damaged goods technically, but still salvageable if your dowry is big enough. You'll be reshuffled and sent elsewhere, like luggage waiting for a new destination. At no point are you encouraged to consider love. Love is a pleasant surprise if it happens, but no one expects it. In fact, if you talk about wanting to fall in love, you might be seen as immature. Love is for poems and ballads, not statecraft. Your affection is not required, your obedience is. And maybe the saddest part of all, you start to believe this is fine, that this is what you were made for, because you've never known any different, because the girls who asked too many questions got sent to nunneries, and the ones who cried too loud simply vanished from mention. You learn to swallow your fear with grace. You learn to smile when your stomach turns. You learn to survive by pretending this is everything you've ever wanted. So, about that dreamy Prince Charming you were promised. Yeah, turns out he's got more nose hair than charm. You finally get to meet him in person after months of painting him in your mind as some kind of golden-haired, lute-strumming heartthrob. Maybe you even practiced your greetings in the mirror, tried out a few dainty expressions, rehearsed your smile until your cheeks ached, and then he arrives, and he's old, like, could have fought in your grandfather's campaign old. You try not to stare when he kisses your hand. His breath smells like spiced wine and bad decisions. His fingers are thick with rings and arthritis, and he calls you my little dove, which sounds romantic until you realise he says it like he's naming a pet. You want to flinch, but instead you curtsy, because the script is set and there's no improvising now. You're engaged to a man old enough to be your father, possibly even your grandfather, and you're expected to smile like this is the best news you've ever heard. This isn't unusual. In fact, it's common. Marriages in the medieval era weren't about chemistry. They were about consolidation. He has a title. You have a dowry. Together you make a power couple in the most exhausting way possible. Sure, sometimes girls were married off to younger nobles, or even to boys their own age, but more often than not the groom had already lived a couple of lives before you were even weaned off porridge. His first wife may have died in childbirth. His second might have been poisoned, or simply faded from the historical record like a smudge on parchment. Either way, you're wife number whatever, and the stakes are somehow even higher now. At court, everyone pretends this is ideal. The older husband is wise, experienced, steady. He knows how to manage estates, raise troops, and most importantly, impregnate a young bride. That last part is emphasised more than you're comfortable with. There are toasts about heirs, about the fruitfulness of your union. There's even a crude joke from one of the nobles about ploughing fresh fields. You don't get it at first, and then, unfortunately, you do. Your attendants are giddy. They help you into a gown trimmed with pearls and whisper about your future with starry eyes. He's so powerful, one says. So distinguished, another sighs. You want to say, he looks like he sweats gravy, but you don't. You just nod and let them perfume your wrists. Because voicing discomfort in a situation like this makes you the problem. The wedding approaches like a thundercloud you can't outrun. And on the big day there's no flutter of nerves in your stomach. Only a kind of dull, creeping dread. You're wrapped in silk so stiff it feels like armour. Your veil is heavy, laced with tiny gold coins that click together like tiny chains. As you walk down the aisle, you can hear your own heartbeat louder than the choir. He's waiting at the altar, beaming like he just acquired a new warhorse. When he lifts your veil, you try to breathe through your nose to avoid the cloying scent of his cologne, some mix of rose water and something that might be brandy. He mutters something about your beauty, about how lucky he is. You nod, you smile, you don't scream. So far so good. And now you're married. Legally, officially, sacramentally bound to a man who already owns more land than you've seen in your entire life. And he owns you too, in almost every sense that matters. Legally, you cease to exist as an independent person. Your property becomes his. Your decisions become his. Even your thoughts are expected to align with his interests. You are effectively an extension of him now, a very fancy, fertile appendage. And the consummation. Oh yes. Everyone knows it's supposed to happen right away. There's an entire ritual built around it in some royal courts. Sometimes witnesses are brought to the bedchamber, not to watch, thank God, but to verify that the marriage was sealed. Some even check the sheets afterward for proof of virginity. It's horrifying, degrading and normalised. You don't get a choice, you never did. You lie there in that impossibly soft bed, beneath imported linens, in a room smelling of frankincense and newly snuffed candles, and wait for it to be over. Maybe he's gentle, maybe not. Maybe he grunts and falls asleep afterward. Or maybe he makes a joke you don't understand and laughs while you try to breathe. Either way, the goal is the same: make a baby. Because again, you're not here for love. You're here to produce heirs, preferably boys. Lots of them. If you're lucky, he already has a couple from a previous marriage and the pressure's not too intense. If not, the entire future of your husband's house now rests in your uterus. You'll be monitored, quietly, obsessively, for signs of pregnancy. Any morning nausea will be reported. Any skipped meal becomes headline news in the gossip circuit of the court. Oh, and fun fact, if you don't get pregnant fast enough, everyone assumes it's your fault. Never mind that the man's diet consists of salted meats and wine, or that he's pushing 60. Infertility is always pinned on the woman, especially if she's young. You might be subjected to weird fertility cures, from herbal tonics to lying under moonlight with a toad amulet under your pillow. That's not a joke. That's your life now, and the pressure never lets up. Because every woman in court is watching you, every noble family waiting for your failure, every chambermaid whispering about your complexion, and if you do conceive, great. Now begins the next phase of fear. You've done your duty, but childbirth in this era is a lottery of survival, and you're the ticket. Scholars often debate whether age gaps in royal marriages were accepted with genuine indifference or just endured in silence. Some princesses reportedly came to respect, perhaps even love, their much older husbands. Others disappeared from record shortly after marriage, their stories ending in footnotes. One thing's certain, their personal happiness rarely factored into the historical summaries. But in your case, let's be real. You're not swooning, you're surviving. You're trying to learn what this man likes, how to avoid his temper, how to flatter him without sounding desperate. You find ways to be agreeable. You nod through his long political monologues. You smile when he gives you jewels. You learn how to distract him when he drinks too much. And you pray, quietly, constantly, that you'll find a space to breathe in the corners of this gilded cage. Beauty, they told you, would be your greatest weapon. Not strength, not wit, not even loyalty. Beauty. You were praised for your soft features before you even understood what they meant. Such delicate wrists, someone once cooed. Like that was a compliment and not a weird obsession with your bone structure. You were raised to believe that your face was your fortune. And now it's your full-time job. You don't wake up and toss your hair like some storybook damsel. No, your morning starts with an hour of grooming so meticulous it feels like preparing for battle. First, your hair. Brushed until your scalp tingles, parted exactly where fashion demands, woven or pinned into whatever shape is trending among the ladies of court. A little off-centre, and you look provincial. Too simple, and you look sickly. Heaven forbid someone whispers you've lost your bloom. Then, your face. There's no real makeup like we have today. Instead, there's powder made of ground-up lead and vinegar, rubbed into your skin to make it ghost pale. That's the goal. Pale, porcelain, untouched by the sun like a good noblewoman should be. Freckles? Scrub them. Moles? Cover them. Blushes made from crushed beetles or berries, but apply too much and you look vulgar. Not enough and you look dead. It's a fine line. Your teeth are rubbed with charcoal and sage, though there's no guarantee they'll stay in your mouth by the time you're 30. Your eyebrows, tweezed into precise curves, if you're lucky enough to have a lady-in-waiting with a steady hand. And fragrance. Let's just say it's doing a lot of the heavy lifting. Bathing is not a daily habit. Most of the time you're masking the scent of your body with rosewater and dried herbs stuffed into your undergarments. But the dress. Oh, the dress. You don't wear clothing. You host it. Layers upon layers. Chemise, corset, petticoats, bodice, overskirt, underskirt, sleeves that require their own infrastructure. Some days the weight is so extreme you feel like you're carrying another person on your back, and the corset isn't just tight. It's weaponized. You're laced so tightly your ribs are compressed, your waist crushed into a fashionable 18 inches if the maid can manage it. Breathing becomes a luxury. Eating is a risk. Laughing, unthinkable. You're not dressing to be comfortable, you're dressing to impress, to communicate wealth, status, obedience, to show that you belong, and the standards shift constantly. One year the look is high foreheads, so they pluck your hairline back until you resemble a mildly surprised egg. Another year, it's slashing, the fashion where you cut little slits in your outer garments, to let the inner layers puff through like a decorative injury, and everyone pretends that this makes sense. All of this effort, all of this pressure, and for what? To be seen, to be assessed. Because in a royal court, being beautiful isn't a vanity, it's a survival strategy. A princess who turns heads is a princess who's remembered. And in a world where fading into the background is a one-way ticket to irrelevance, you'll do whatever it takes to keep the spotlight warm. The strange thing is how quickly it becomes your normal. You don't notice how long it takes to get dressed because it's always taken that long. You don't notice the bruises from corset stays or the ache in your feet from shoes that weren't made for walking. You only notice when someone doesn't compliment you, when a duke's eyes slide past you at dinner, when your husband forgets to mention your gown. That's when the panic creeps in. Are you slipping? Are you losing value? And yes, beauty is value. Because without it, your leverage disappears. You're less likely to be listened to, less likely to be protected, less likely to be remembered. There are entire diplomatic treatises where you're referred to not by name but by appearance. The fair one, the golden-haired bride, the elder daughter with the pleasant eyes. Your personality doesn't make it into the paperwork. There's a chilling fringe detail that sums this up. Some noble women, especially in French and Italian courts, reportedly slept with raw meat on their faces to draw out impurities. That's how desperate the standards were. Not satisfied with rosewater or powdered pearls, raw meat. The fact that your chamber didn't smell like a butcher's stall was probably considered restraint. And if you're sick, you better hide it. Illness makes you look weak. No one wants a fragile princess, especially not one who's supposed to produce heirs. You get your cheeks pinched before court appearances to simulate vitality. You dab vinegar behind your ears to keep from fainting. One wrong shade of skin and rumours start to swirl. She's wasting. She's cursed. She's unclean. Meanwhile, the men, they can be greying, bloated, balding, and somehow still distinguished. They wear the same style of tunic for 15 years, and no one bats an eye. They develop gout and still strut around like cocks in velvet. You gain 5 pounds and it's an international incident. And the competition? Vicious. Other women at court are watching you constantly, sometimes out of admiration, often out of calculation. If you're too beautiful, you're a threat. If you're not beautiful enough, you're irrelevant. It's a tightrope walk, and no one tells you where it ends. You start picking apart other women's appearances just to survive the scrutiny of your own. That's not vanity, that's self-defense. There's scholarly debate over whether beauty gave medieval women a kind of soft power. Some argue it allowed princesses to manipulate their situations, gain influence, bend men's wills. Others argue that it simply reinforced their objectification, that all this effort to perfect the exterior only distracted from how little control they had over the rest of their lives. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between, an illusion of power, held together by pins and pearls. You stand before the mirror in your chamber, your gown glittering, your skin powdered, your hair arranged like a crown made of braids. You barely recognize yourself. You smile. It looks right, you think. It's the right angle, the right softness, the right amount of submission. But inside, you feel like you're being taxidermied alive. Because the thing they never told you about being beautiful is that it never ends. You don't get to arrive. There's no finish line where you're declared beautiful enough and allowed to rest. You have to maintain always. Because the moment you slip, the moment you falter, someone younger and brighter is already waiting to take your place. You always imagine court life as a glittering maze of marble halls and golden goblets, where everyone spoke in poetry and smiled with genuine warmth. Turns out it's more like a snake pit dressed in lace. No one tells you this outright, of course. They just smile too long, compliment your gown a little too sweetly, and call you dear like it's a blade hidden in velvet. You've entered the real world of princesshood now, not the one in fairy tales, but the cutthroat, backstabbing arena that is royal court. You're not just performing for suitors anymore. You're surviving a daily game of human chess, and unfortunately you are not the queen. You're barely a bishop. Every woman in your circle, from the lowest ranked lady-in-waiting to the duchess who pretends to mentor you, has an agenda. Everyone wants something. A better position, more influence, a stronger family alliance. And what stands in their way? You, your beauty, your favour with the king, the attention you get from visiting nobles, the way the bishop laughed a little too hard at your joke over supper. And so the sabotage begins, not open, not with daggers or poison, not yet, but with whispers, with glances exchanged behind fans, with a sudden change in seating arrangement at dinner that leaves you next to a man known for accidentally brushing his hand across women's laps. Your gloves go missing one morning. A rumour spreads that your hair is prematurely thinning. Someone accidentally leaves a draft of a letter in your chamber suggesting your marriage was paid for with more gold than your weight. And that's just Tuesday. You can't trust anyone. Not fully. Even your attendants might be feeding information to rival households. The girl who braids your hair each morning could be reporting your moods to the Dowager Queen. Your music tutor might work for your husband's cousin. Everyone has loyalties that bend like candlelight, and you learn quickly to speak carefully, to smile with your mouth more than your eyes, to pretend you didn't hear that insult wrapped in sugar. And it gets more complicated, because court isn't just a nest of noble women. There are men here too. Powerful ones, flirtatious ones, dangerous ones. Some are genuinely charming, which almost makes them worse. A harmless compliment turns into a rumour by sundown. A polite nod in the wrong corridor becomes an accusation by the next morning. Your name ends up in conversations you're not a part of, your virtue dissected by bored lords with nothing better to do than speculate on who you've smiled at this week. And the Queen? She might hate you. Or she might pretend to adore you while orchestrating your downfall. Depends on whether she sees you as a threat to her own daughters or as a useful pawn. If she does take you under her wing, beware. That wing can become a cage quickly. You're expected to support her, echo her sentiments, and attend her endless prayer hours even when your knees ache and your mind drifts to escape. She might ask your opinion on a trivial matter just to watch you struggle to answer without offending half the room. This constant manoeuvring is exhausting. You never relax. You sip wine slowly because drunkenness equals vulnerability. You dance when asked, but not too well. Wouldn't want to seem like you're trying to show up the Duchess. You compliment another lady's dress, knowing she'll probably take it as sarcasm. Your smiles are rehearsed, your silences are strategic, and through all this you still have to be perfect. A wrong word can follow you for weeks. A raised voice can spark rumours of hysteria. Even your grief is scrutinised. Cry too little and you're cold. Cry too much and you're unstable. You miss your mother? Keep it to yourself. Miss your old tutor? Hide the letter he sent you. Everything you do becomes a move in this awful, elegant game, and you're not sure anymore if you're playing it or being played. Want a fringe fact to really unsettle the mood? In some courts, noble families hired professional rumour spreaders. Yes, people whose job it was to mingle at events, eavesdrop, and leak just enough misinformation to damage rivals without being traced. They'd drop comments into conversations like poison pearls. "Oh, I heard Lady Eleanor's daughter was seen speaking with a stable boy," and let the gossip do the rest. It's not just paranoia, it's strategy. Scholars still debate just how much power princesses actually had in these environments. Some argue they became masters of subtle influence, building networks of allies, controlling fashion trends, even swaying minor political outcomes through charm and whisper campaigns of their own. Others argue that all this manoeuvring was ultimately empty, a way for powerless women to feel like they mattered in a world that wouldn't let them own land or speak at council. Either way, it was survival. And you're doing it in heels. You learn the value of alliances. You start picking favourites carefully. The quiet lady-in-waiting who reads Latin, valuable. The talkative one who's always 5 minutes behind everyone else, risky. You begin crafting a tiny circle around you. One loyal servant, one discreet musician, maybe a falconer who doesn't care who your father is. These people keep you sane. Sometimes they even keep you alive. But you also learn to disappear, to be just charming enough, just forgettable enough. Too visible, and you become a target. Too invisible, and you lose relevance. It's a delicate, exhausting dance, and it never ends. Court life isn't seasonal, it's eternal. There are always feasts, always hunts, always ambassadors, always someone watching. Your only reprieve might be a single walk in the garden under armed escort. And even then someone is whispering about how melancholic you look. And God forbid you actually fall for someone, some charming knight or poetic page. Even if you do nothing wrong, the court will sniff it out. A glance, a letter, a shared moment under a canopy during a rainstorm. Suddenly your name is paired with his in court ballads, and you're forced to deny things you've never even imagined. Meanwhile, your husband, or worse, your father, starts asking questions. So you harden, not because you want to, but because you have to. The softness drains from your voice. The hope slips quietly out the back door of your mind. You learn to play this role like a maestro, and deep down you tell yourself that maybe, just maybe, if you survive long enough, you'll find a way to carve out a little power, a little space, a quiet room at the back of the castle where no one asks you to smile. Let's talk about your dress. Not the symbolism, not the politics woven into each stitch, we already covered that, but the actual physical thing. Because at this point in your royal life, your dress is no longer fashion. It's a second skeleton. It wears you more than you wear it, and most days it feels like a slow-motion execution by embroidery. It starts with the underlayers. You step into a linen chemise so stiff from starch it crackles. It itches too, especially around the seams. Next comes the corset, your eternal frenemy. The lacing is pulled by one, maybe two servants, who yank it tighter with each breath until your ribs feel like they're trying to escape your body. You're told to exhale, then hold while they cinch, and then you just live like that. Shallow breaths, shoulders back, stomach tucked, like you're being slowly folded into a decorative scroll. Once your torso is thoroughly squeezed, they start layering the skirts. Each one adds weight. Wool for winter, silk for court, velvet if your husband's in a generous mood. The heaviest ones feel like wearing a soaked blanket. Some are so wide, you can't fit through doorways without turning sideways like a piece of furniture. Try not to laugh too hard or sneeze. There's no room for your lungs to move anyway. Then come the sleeves. They're often detachable, sometimes weighing more than your chamber pot. You've got bell sleeves, trumpet sleeves, sleeves that drag on the ground and collect leaves like a broom behind you. Fashion says you should look ethereal. Reality says you resemble a well-decorated hostage. And of course your dress isn't complete without accessories. Jewellery, gloves, girdles, and the ever-important headdress. Depending on the current royal trend, this could be a padded roll like a sausage wreath around your head, or a cone-shaped hennin tall enough to pick up weather signals, and everything is fastened with tiny pins that jab you every time you move wrong. Which is constantly. Why go through all this? Because the dress tells the world who you are without you having to speak. It announces your rank, your marital status, your region, and your current political usefulness. Certain colours are restricted, like purple, reserved for royalty, or deep crimson if you're married to someone who owns more land than God. If you wear the wrong shade, that's not a fashion faux pas, that's insubordination. And let's talk about the dangers. Yes, actual physical dangers. A tight corset can displace your organs. There are stories, possibly exaggerated, possibly not, of girls fainting, vomiting, or even cracking ribs during banquets. Heavy gowns catch on fire more often than you'd think. All it takes is brushing too close to a candle while you're turning. Boom. One moment you're curtsying, the next you're a human torch. Here's a strange little historical nugget for you. Lead was used not just in makeup, but also in trimming certain fabrics. Decorative metallic embroidery often included toxic metals for that extra shimmer. You're quite literally poisoning yourself in the name of style. Slow, glamorous death by fashion. And none of this clothing is easy to remove. Getting undressed takes as long as getting dressed, and it requires assistance. That means privacy is a luxury you can't afford. If you're sweating, someone will dab your brow. If you're itchy, someone else scratches for you. If you're, let's say, in need of a chamber pot, Well, guess who's holding your skirts while you squat like royalty? You might be thinking, well, surely this is just for special occasions. But no, every appearance is a performance. Even walking through the garden means at least 3 layers, gloves, and a head covering. And you never walk alone. Someone always accompanies you, not just for security, but because you're never really off stage. Someone is always watching, judging. And if you ever try to wear something simple, something comfortable, something that lets you breathe, scandal. People whisper that you're depressed, that your marriage is failing, that your family is losing power, because comfort equals rebellion, and rebellion equals instability, and instability gets punished. Scholars debate whether these elaborate fashions were a form of oppression or a sneaky kind of power. Sure, the dresses were suffocating, but they also made you visible, literally unmissable. A woman in court dress couldn't be ignored. Some historians argue that this visibility gave noble women a kind of social leverage, an ability to dominate space and attention without ever raising their voices. Others argue that the whole setup was a trap. The more you invest in looking powerful, the less time you have to actually be powerful. A glittering distraction stitched in gold. But the worst part, you start to internalize it. You believe that being beautiful, being admired, being presentable is the same thing as being worthy. You start measuring your value by how loudly people gasp when you enter a room. You begin judging other women not for their wit or bravery, but for the shine of their pearls and the sharpness of their silhouettes. The dress becomes your identity, and that identity is exhausting. There are moments, tiny ones, when you catch your reflection and feel a flicker of pride. Maybe your gown actually flatters your figure today. Maybe your hair fell just right. Maybe your husband finally noticed, and you think, maybe this isn't so bad. Maybe this is enough. But deep down, you know better. Because the fabric doesn't protect you. The jewels don't shield you. You can be wrapped in silk, embroidered with lions and lilies, and still feel like you're wearing a disguise. The dress may impress others, but it traps you. It restricts you. It reminds you that you're a symbol, not a person, and it's heavy in all the ways that matter. So when you walk into the hall, floating on crushed velvet, metal-threaded lace, and whispering silk, and everyone turns to look, remember, they're not seeing you, they're seeing the dress. And what they see in the dress is what they want from you. Beauty, silence, obedience, legacy. Whether or not you survive under the weight of it, that's not their concern. Privacy. Oh, you sweet naive thing. You gave that up the day you were born into royalty, and every year since has only trimmed it down further until there's basically none left at all. By the time you're married and properly installed in your new court, privacy is less a right and more of a joke. A memory, really. Like riding your pony without a chaperone or singing out loud in the garden without someone taking notes. Let's walk through your day. From the moment you open your eyes, you are observed. A maid is already waiting near your bedside. She's been standing there in the early morning chill for who knows how long, listening for the sound of your breathing to change so she can start her day of hovering. She gently nudges you awake with a "Good morning, my lady," as if she's offering you the choice to start your day, but you know you never had a choice. Then come the attendants. Yes, plural. Your dressing routine takes at least 3 women, one to bring the underthings, one to help with the corset, and one to pin your hair. And don't even think about getting a moment alone to rub the sleep from your eyes or scratch your armpit. You're a living statue, and statues don't itch. Breakfast? Public. You eat in front of whoever's been invited to the morning chamber, which could be your ladies-in-waiting, a visiting noblewoman, or, lucky you, the bishop who's always subtly commenting on how much jam you put on your bread. Everything from how you butter it to how much you chew is silently judged, and you're expected to make pleasant conversation while you do it, even if your jaws sore from being clamped shut all night with anxiety. You're rarely, if ever, alone. If you want to go for a walk, at least 2 attendants come with you. Or if the weather's nice and court is bored. You can't even pace your own garden without people trailing behind, pretending to admire the hedges while listening to your every sigh. You know you're being watched even when you're not looking, because they never really stop watching. Now, here's where things get uncomfortable. You need to use the chamber pot. It's not a rare event. Everyone pees. But you can't just walk off and do it discreetly. You either do it behind a folding screen in your chamber, with your maid standing nearby in case you require assistance, or you're forced to use a more public space, like a dressing room shared by other noblewomen. Privacy? Please. That screen is basically tissue paper, and the gossip that swirls around whose stomach is gurgling that morning is enough to turn your cheeks permanently red. And it gets worse. Baths. Those rare, glorious moments when you think you might actually feel like a human being again are not solitary. You're bathed by someone, or multiple someones. They heat the water, perfume it, gently scrub you down with cloths and oils. It sounds indulgent until you realise they're also checking for blemishes, bruises, and anything that might suggest illness or, God forbid, pregnancy. That's right. Your body is monitored so closely, they'd know if something was growing in your womb before you did. If you ever ask to be left alone, people get suspicious. Why? What are you hiding? Are you depressed, scheming, pregnant, writing letters you shouldn't? No one trusts a royal woman who enjoys solitude. Solitude breeds independence, and independence is one slip away from scandal. And speaking of letters, those aren't private either. Any correspondence you send may be opened by your husband's secretary, the court scribe, or the head of household security before it even leaves the palace. Any reply you receive, same deal. The idea of pouring your soul into a letter feels romantic until you realise half the court is probably reading over your shoulder. That heartfelt poem you tried to write last year? Yeah. It's now a joke passed around at dinners in another duchy. Here's a strange historical tidbit for you. Some princesses had special guards called chamberlains, who were tasked with protecting them, but not from assassins, from themselves. Their job was to monitor your movements, ensure you weren't speaking to unsuitable men, and report anything suspicious. These weren't bodyguards. They were snitches with fancy titles. And it's not just the servants and officials. The walls themselves seem to listen. Tapestries hide alcoves. Windows carry voices. That warm smile from your lady-in-waiting might vanish the second you turn your back. You learn to speak in code. You train your face not to react. You master the art of answering questions with questions and saying a lot, without really saying anything. Over time, you begin to doubt even your own thoughts. You think something unkind about a courtier. Do they know? Can they see it on your face? You start to discipline your expressions. You smile at nothing. You laugh on cue. You become fluent in the most exhausting language of all, noble politeness. It's the art of looking calm while your insides twist into knots. Of course, some women try to carve out space for themselves. They claim headaches and retreat to their chambers. They go on extended pilgrimages. They feign illness just for a moment of silence, but even then they're rarely alone. A physician might visit. A priest might be sent to counsel. No one gets to vanish without raising eyebrows. And still, scholars argue about whether this lack of privacy was merely tradition, or an intentional form of control. Some say it was practical. After all, noble women were valuable assets. Others see it as a mechanism of surveillance designed to ensure obedience. Either way, the result is the same. Your mind becomes a private place only because your body never can be. You lie in bed at night with the curtains drawn around your canopied frame, the only sliver of space that feels even remotely yours. And even then, you know a maid is dozing in a chair nearby. You can hear her breathing. You know if you so much as sniffle, she'll stir. There's nowhere to hide. Nowhere to breathe without permission. And eventually you stop expecting privacy. You stop needing it. You become your own observer, constantly checking your posture, your tone, your pacing. You become two people, the one who feels deep down and the one who performs day and night for an audience that never blinks. You knew motherhood would come eventually. You were warned, in veiled metaphors and coded prayers, that one of your most sacred duties was to bear heirs. But no one really prepared you for the truth of it, how your body becomes a battleground the moment you're pregnant. There's no joy in the discovery, only a hushed flurry of reactions from the women around you, all trying not to look too relieved or too concerned. You've done what you were expected to do. You're with child. And now the countdown begins. The moment it's confirmed, your world shrinks. You're moved to different chambers, quieter ones with thicker drapes and fewer stairs. Everyone around you starts speaking more softly, like you might shatter from a loud word. Your meals are watched more carefully. Your sleep is monitored. Your pulse checked by a physician who smells like boiled leather and always looks slightly bored. You're treated like a holy object, precious, delicate, and deeply inconvenient. You're not in control of your own pregnancy. That privilege belongs to your husband and the court physicians. They debate over your diet, your movement, your wardrobe. You're not allowed to climb more than 4 stairs. You can't ride a horse, or bathe unattended, or even braid your hair too tightly. Someone claims it affects the womb. You're a vessel now, and everything you do is about protecting the tiny royal future inside you. Not out of love, necessarily, but because a stillbirth means failure. A miscarriage means disgrace. A daughter means disappointment. Your body begins to change. You feel sick every morning, sometimes all day. You crave odd things. Salted fish, honeyed almonds, even chalk. Your joints ache. Your back pulls. You lie awake at night with your hands on your belly, praying the kicks you felt weren't imagined. And all the while, you're still expected to look composed, to attend court, to smile when someone comments on your glow, even when your gums are bleeding and your ankles are the size of overstuffed bread loaves. No one will say it aloud, but they're all thinking it. Will she survive the birth? Because childbirth isn't a private family moment. It's a high-stakes gamble. The statistics are grim, even among royalty, especially among royalty. All those early marriages, repeated pregnancies, limited medical knowledge, and the overwhelming pressure to produce sons, it turns every labour into a coin toss with death. When the time finally comes, you're surrounded. Not by your mother or your closest friend, but by midwives, attendants, a priest, and, if your husband insists, a physician who barely knows which end of the baby comes out first. You're lying on a bed soaked in herbs and holy water, gripping the sheets until your fingers bruise, screaming through a mouth you've been taught to keep shut your whole life. And here's a medieval gem for you. Some courts treated the delivery room like a public affair. Curtains might be drawn, but the noise of your labour would drift through the halls. Your cries would become court gossip. A stillbirth would be mourned like a military defeat. A son would be celebrated with banquets. A daughter might get a polite nod and some flowers, and it doesn't end when the baby's born. Oh no, that's just the beginning. If you survive, the blood loss, the fever, the infection, and that's a big if, then comes the ceremonial weighing of the child, the announcing of the name, the flood of gifts and congratulations. But your part in the story is already fading. The baby is the new star. You're praised for your work, thanked for your sacrifice, and promptly tucked away to recover alone while the wet nurse takes over. If the child is healthy, you're allowed some rest. If not, you're watched for signs of melancholy. You mustn't grieve too publicly, even if the baby's taken from you within days. Too much emotion makes people uncomfortable. You're a symbol, remember? Not a mother. A queen, a duchess, a womb in pearls. Now imagine this happening every year, sometimes twice in a year. Because the pressure to produce an heir, not just children but specifically sons, is relentless. Daughters don't count. Stillbirths are quickly erased. You're expected to try again and again and again until your body gives out or someone decides you're no longer fruitful. And if that happens, you might be replaced. Quietly, politely, politically. Here's a morbid but true little historical fact. Noble women often wrote wills before labour. That's how common it was to die giving birth. Some even prepared burial clothes in advance, embroidered with their family crest and prayers for salvation. You'd think that would cause someone to reconsider the system. It didn't. And even when the child survives, the bond between you is not guaranteed. Royal children are often raised by nurses, tutors and governesses. You might see your son during formal visits, hear his first words from a servant, or watch your daughter take her first steps from across a gilded nursery she'll barely remember you in. Your job was to produce them. Raising them. That's a task for other people. People considered less important, though somehow also more trusted. Historians debate whether noble women formed strong bonds with their children despite the distance. Some did. There are letters from queens begging for more time with their sons, or pleading to keep their daughters closer after illness. But even in those rare, tender records, you can feel the limitations. You can sense the heartbreak. The separation isn't just physical, it's built into the system, and the system doesn't stop turning. Court never pauses to let you recover from childbirth. There are still banquets to attend, ambassadors to greet, and alliances to maintain. Even in your weakened state, you're expected to return, powdered and laced, smiling with that same soft expression, as though your body hasn't just been torn apart. Sometimes you catch a glimpse of yourself in a mirror, pale, exhausted, sagging in places that used to be taut, and wonder if you're still the same girl who once believed in fairy tales, who thought being a princess meant singing in towers and dancing at balls, not bleeding on linen sheets, while strangers whisper prayers, but you don't say any of that, you don't let it show. You just sit up straighter, nod when the physician tells you to rest more, though you won't, and whisper to the heavens, please let the next one be a boy. There's something profoundly unsettling about power when you can't say no to it. It's one thing to have rules, obligations, customs. It's another to realise that your entire life can be overwritten by a single word from someone above you, especially when that someone is your own father. Or worse, your husband. The king, after all, is not just a man. He is law, breath, God-willed authority. And when you are a medieval princess, you don't just live under the king's rule. You belong to it. Let's be blunt. You can't say no to the king. Not when he orders you to attend a feast. Not when he tells you to smile at a rival ambassador. Not when he arranges your marriage to a man you've never met, and certainly not when he demands an heir, a gift, a gesture of obedience. If you're lucky, he's kind. If you're not, he's entitled. And most of the time, no one, not even God apparently, is interested in the difference. You learn early on that affection is conditional. Your father may kiss your forehead when you do what's expected, beam when you recite your prayers perfectly at court, or reward you with a new brooch when your embroidery wins praise from the Duchess. But challenge him, even slightly, and the temperature shifts. Suddenly your meals are taken in silence. Your favourite lady-in-waiting is reassigned. You're reminded that your position is not absolute. It is borrowed, and it can be revoked. And your husband? Same rules, just with more intimacy and less mercy. Whatever happens behind closed doors is his right. That's the word they use. Right. It sounds so clean, so legal. But you know what it really means. It means you don't get to refuse. If he wants your company tonight, you provide it. If he wants to parade you around like a prized horse at the next royal tournament, you go. If he wants you silent during council meetings, you smile and nod. If he wants to pretend you're the reason he hasn't produced a son, you take the blame. Your feelings aren't relevant, your consent is assumed. And the worst part, everyone supports this. It's not scandalous, it's expected. A disobedient wife is not a tragic figure. She's a political liability. A rebellious daughter isn't a misunderstood soul. She's a threat to national stability. Entire armies have been raised over less. Your silence is not just personal, it's patriotic. You might think, surely there were exceptions. Surely some princesses stood up for themselves. And yes, a few did. Some pushed back, some negotiated. Some even managed to influence major decisions through charm, wit, or sheer force of will. But for every Eleanor of Aquitaine, there are 100 nameless women who were married off, kept quiet, and forgotten. History remembers the survivors, not the silenced. Want a disturbing historical tidbit to add to your royal nightmare? Some kings exercised what's called droit du seigneur, the alleged right of the lord, to sleep with any woman under his rule on her wedding night. Now, whether this practice was actually common or just a later myth is debated by scholars, but the fact that people believed it was possible tells you everything you need to know about how power worked. It wasn't questioned, it simply was. Even the church, your supposed moral safeguard, often reinforced this hierarchy. Priests preached obedience as a divine virtue. Wives were told to submit to their husbands. Daughters were told to honour their fathers. The spiritual vocabulary of your life is soaked in submission. Disobedience wasn't just wrong, it was sinful. And sin, as they loved to remind you, had consequences far worse than earthly punishment. Sometimes you fantasize about defying them, just once. Refusing to wear the gown your husband favours. Sneaking out at night for a breath of air without an escort. Saying no when the king demands your presence. But you know how that would end. You've heard the stories of the noblewomen who pushed too far, banished to convents stripped of titles, locked away in cold towers with one maid and a chapel for company. Some were never seen again. Some were written out of history entirely, like a page ripped from the Royal Chronicle. And let's be clear, saying yes doesn't protect you either. Compliance doesn't guarantee safety, it just delays the danger. Because men in power are not consistent. They're volatile. A smile today doesn't mean kindness tomorrow. You learn to read the room like your life depends on it, because sometimes it does. One wrong word in the king's presence, one misinterpreted look, and suddenly you're the focus of rumours, suspicion, or worse, punishment. Here's a grim little court custom. If a royal woman was accused of impropriety, even without evidence, her chambers might be searched, her letters confiscated, and her friends interrogated. If she protested too loudly, it could be considered proof of guilt. The quieter you are, the safer you are. But silence, over time, becomes its own kind of erasure. And yet you survive. Somehow, you learn to choose your battles with surgical precision. You smile when you want to scream. You flatter the king's advisors even when they sneer at you. You master the art of being present without being noticed, helpful without being threatening, clever without being too clever. And when you do win a small victory, getting a say in your daughter's tutor, choosing your own gown for a feast, influencing a diplomatic visit, it feels like moving a mountain with your bare hands. But deep down you know that these wins are fragile. They depend entirely on the goodwill of men who don't see you as an equal. They see you as useful, temporary, replaceable. You're not allowed to say no, because your yes is the only thing keeping their illusion of order intact. So you keep saying it. Yes, my lord. Yes, your grace. Yes, I understand. Yes, I will. You speak the word so many times it stops sounding like a choice and starts sounding like a spell. A charm to keep the wolves at bay. And every now and then, when you're alone, truly alone if that ever happens, you say it again. Not out loud, but in your head. Just to remind yourself. Because in a world where you're not allowed to refuse, even a whispered no becomes a revolution. Your dowry, which you've probably heard whispered about since before you could read, is not a chest of coins or a few trinkets from your family's treasury. It's a weapon. A geopolitical battering ram disguised in gold embroidery and solemn vows. When you're a medieval princess, you're not so much a person as a packaged deal. A fragile parcel filled with land rights, alliances, and enough velvet to make your future mother-in-law weep with joy. Your dowry is your real value. It is your price tag. And everyone has an opinion about what you're worth. You might think a dowry is just money. That's adorable. Your dowry might include entire villages, trade routes, religious relics, warships, or even the promise of military aid. Your marriage is less about matching hearts and more about redrawing maps. A minor duchy might promise you a few thousand florins and a countryside estate. A powerful kingdom. They'll throw in a city, some castles, and possibly a bishopric, just for good measure. It's not a wedding, it's an arms deal. You've heard your father argue over it, often late at night when he thinks you're asleep. He's trading your future like a merchant at a spice stall. Your cousin was sent off with 400 knights, and a gold crucifix once worn by Saint Whoever. Your older sister's dowry included enough silver to bankroll a minor war. What do you bring? A modest fleet, some ancestral farmland, and a not insignificant portion of your family's claim to a border region that's been fought over for 2 generations. You're not the girl in the veil. You're the terms and conditions. And let's be real. The bigger your dowry, the less freedom you have. If your family's offering up half their wealth, you're not just marrying into another household, you're fused to it. You can't leave. You can't falter. You don't get to have a nervous breakdown in year 2 because the food is bad and your husband has halitosis. You have to succeed. Because if you don't, all that gold, land, and honour goes up in smoke, and your family gets to enjoy the fallout. It's not uncommon for noble girls to be betrothed based on their dowries before they're even born. While your mother was labouring to bring you into the world, the men were already deciding which neighbouring crown might want a slice of your family's holdings. The moment you came out with 10 fingers and a respectable face, they slapped a political projection onto you like a shipping label. And if the dowry is delayed, or deemed insufficient, that's when things get spicy. Negotiations stall, diplomats sulk, letters get increasingly passive-aggressive. There have been entire wars, because someone's dowry didn't come through on time. Castles burned because a nobleman felt shortchanged on the silver promised with his teenage bride. Imagine the pressure of knowing your marriage could end in bloodshed if your father's treasurer miscounts the coins. Want a delightful fringe detail? In some parts of Europe, the bride's dowry chest would be paraded through the streets in a show of wealth. Gold plates, tapestries, furniture, bolts of silk, all hauled behind you like a royal freight train while commoners gawk and your in-laws calculate your value with every step. And you, sitting stiffly in your carriage, know that every gasp of admiration, every whispered number has nothing to do with you, only what you're worth. It's possible, just barely, that your dowry might give you leverage. Some women have used their massive inheritance to command more respect. A generous dowry could buy you breathing room, the ear of your husband, even a say in matters of state. But those are rare cases. Most of the time, your dowry doesn't empower you, it obligates you. The moment it's delivered, you're expected to perform. Be fertile, be gracious, be quiet. And if you die before fulfilling your duties, good news, your husband might get to keep the dowry anyway, or at least fight for it in court. There are actual legal documents that discuss what happens to your dowry if you perish before giving birth to a male heir. Romantic, right? Scholars have long debated whether dowries offered women a form of economic power, or whether they simply reinforced their role as property in noble transactions. On one hand, it's money in your name. On the other, you have no say in how it's used. Your signature is stamped onto a contract you didn't write. You're the delivery method, not the decision maker. And don't forget the reverse side of this twisted coin, the bride price or mourning gift from your husband's family. It's supposed to be symbolic, a gesture of goodwill. But more often, it's a token trade for everything you've brought to the table. He gives you a necklace. You give him a foothold in your family's territory. Fair, right? If negotiations go badly, you become a cautionary tale. Don't end up like Lady Juliana, they'll whisper. Her dowry wasn't delivered, and she spent her wedding night in a stable. Or worse, you become a hostage to your own inheritance. Your husband might remind you, in front of everyone, how much your presents cost. He might use your dowry as leverage, as guilt, as control. After everything I gave up to marry you. Becomes a refrain you hear more often than, good morning. You lie in bed at night and think about all the things you might have done if your dowry had bought freedom instead of bondage. Maybe you could have chosen your own husband. Maybe you could have negotiated your role, your influence, your future. But those aren't options for you. Your dowry made the choices for you. It signed the contract. It rode ahead of you into your new life, shining and beautiful and hollow. And so you smile as they toast to your future. You let them dress you in a gown heavy with your family's wealth. You wave from the carriage as your dowry rolls behind you in locked chests guarded by men who don't know your name. And you pray, not for love, not even for happiness, but that your worth, bought and sold, will somehow protect you from everything you're about to endure. You wake up one morning to find that your closest companion has vanished. No warning, no farewell, just an empty cushion at your side where she always sat during morning prayers. She was your lady in waiting, your childhood friend, your secret keeper. You shared jokes in the margins of embroidery, stole bites of honeyed figs together, whispered about handsome guards. And now she's gone, removed from your life like a pulled thread, leaving behind a fraying edge that no one dares to mend. You ask after her, gently at first, a raised eyebrow, a casual mention at supper. Silence. Then a maid, trying too hard to seem indifferent, mutters something about her being reassigned to another estate, far away, for discipline. No one looks at you when they say it. Everyone suddenly finds their goblet very interesting. That's when it hits you. This wasn't a normal transfer, this was a warning. You don't know what she did. Maybe nothing. Maybe she was too bold, too beautiful. Maybe someone powerful grew jealous. Or maybe someone whispered a lie at the wrong moment. And now she's halfway across the kingdom, or worse, buried quietly in the cold stone chapel. You'll never know. That's the thing about court. People don't disappear all at once. They just start becoming invisible, like smoke from a dying candle. Your inner circle begins to shift. New faces arrive. Girls with perfect manners and overly rehearsed laughs. They know better than to get too close. You're still a princess after all, and they are here to serve, not befriend. But every so often, one of them softens around you, lets slip a personal story, and you think, maybe, Maybe this one's real. Maybe I can trust her. Spoiler, you can't. Not completely. One day, a noblewoman you've known since childhood pulls you aside and warns you, softly, that one of your attendants has been passing your letters to your husband's steward. Another has been reporting what you eat, how you sleep, even how often you cry. You feel the room tilt. You've always known you were being watched. But being betrayed by someone who handed you your slippers that morning, that's different. That's personal. From then on, every word you speak becomes a calculation. You compliment someone's dress, and later hear it repeated with a twist. Apparently you said it with mocking undertones. You refuse to dance at a banquet and are told you're melancholic. You laugh too loudly and you're unstable. You remain quiet and you're cold. Every move, no matter how innocent, is twisted into something else by the time it travels through the court grapevine. Let's sprinkle in a little bizarre historical detail to add to the mood. In some medieval courts, nobles employed professional poison testers, not just for their food, but for their friends. You could hire someone to test whether a new courtier was loyal, usually by planting false information and seeing where it ended up. Yes, actual medieval spycraft disguised as friendship. So now, when a maid gives you a compliment, you wonder, is she being kind, or is she testing me? The paranoia grows, slowly but surely. You start watching your own allies. You hold back stories you would have once shared freely. You test people in return, offer half-truths just to see if they resurface later with a new ending. You ask questions you already know the answer to, just to confirm who's lying, and you start to realize that everyone is lying, all the time. Even those closest to you, especially them. There's a reason friendship at court is a fragile thing. The stakes are simply too high. A careless word can cost someone their inheritance. An innocent letter can be spun into a scandal. And loyalty, that's a luxury. When a duchess's life depends on keeping favour with the queen, she'll sell out her best friend for a few months of peace. When a lady-in-waiting has 5 siblings relying on her pay, she'll pass along your secrets if it means a raise. It's not evil. It's survival. And you can't even fault them. Because you're doing it too. Not outright betrayal, not yet, but you're careful. You protect yourself. You stay vague. You make promises with wide eyes and vague timelines. You learn to compliment people's enemies and say things like, well, I've always admired her ambition, instead of, she's a snake. You become fluent in doublespeak. You become a court creature. Beautiful, polished, utterly unreadable. And yet, even with all this, you still want someone. Just one person. Someone who knows the real you. Who remembers the girl who once dreamed of climbing trees and reading books not written by monks. Someone who knows your favourite songs, the ones you hum when no one's listening. Someone who doesn't care about your title, your dress, your dowry, or your fertility status. Just you. But those people disappear. They always do. Sometimes it's subtle. They marry and move away. Their family falls from favour and they vanish overnight. They speak up in the wrong room. Or they simply drift, realising, wisely, that getting close to you is dangerous. You are, after all, the centre of a very volatile orbit. Everyone who stands near you risks getting burned. Scholars often wonder whether royal women felt isolated despite their crowded lives. Diaries are rare. Letters are heavily censored or lost. But in the few fragments that survive, there's a theme: loneliness. A deep, echoing loneliness that no amount of music, feasts or jewels can drown out. You can be surrounded by 50 people and still feel entirely alone, because none of them see you, not really. And so you adapt. You build an inner world where your thoughts are safe. You retreat there often, especially on days when the court feels more like a stage than a home. You rehearse your expressions. You let people believe you're oblivious, distracted, simple. You let them underestimate you, because that's the only kind of power you have left. The power to hide in plain sight. But when the halls go quiet, when the musicians pack up, when the torches are snuffed one by one, and the stone chambers fill with cold silence, you lie awake and remember her. The friend who vanished, the one who laughed with you in the rose garden, the one who once braided your hair and said, "You'll be happy, I know it." And you wonder where she is, if she's alive, if she ever thinks of you, and if she does, whether she still believes what she said. You wake one morning to the soft clink of embroidery needles and the faint smell of lavender water, and you realise something grim. You're bored. Not the I need a hobby kind of boredom. This is deep, soul-sapping, mind-fraying boredom. The kind that comes when your entire life is controlled by people who believe that a woman's mind is a porcelain teacup, pretty, delicate, and best left on a shelf. You weren't trained to be curious. You were trained to be quiet. And now that you're officially installed as wife, mother, and politically mute accessory, there's simply nothing for you to do. No one wants a princess with interests. It unsettles the men. Too much curiosity hints at ambition, and ambition in a woman implies disobedience, which of course implies danger. So you're encouraged to occupy your time with appropriate diversions. You know, things that won't spark any pesky critical thinking or unladylike opinions. Embroidery, prayer, watching falcons do the same swoop over the same trees every single day. If you're really lucky, maybe some music, harp, lute, possibly flute, but definitely nothing loud. Loud is for boys. You suggest reading. They suggest caution. Books are fine, of course, as long as they're religious texts or moral tales. No poetry unless it's about martyrs. No philosophy unless it's been pre-approved by a bishop who flinches at strong verbs. And absolutely no political treatises. That's not reading, that's rebellion. And don't get too cosy with the monks. Yes, they're literate. Yes, they're interesting. But princess who spends too much time talking to cloistered men with ink-stained fingers. That's how rumours start. Are you too pious? Too educated? Too different? All bad options. So you learn to borrow books quietly. Read at night by candlelight, then tuck the pages back beneath your mattress before anyone notices. You miss riding. Galloping across open fields, wind tearing at your veil, hair loosening as the ground races beneath you. But now, you're not permitted to ride alone or fast or on anything more spirited than a mare so docile she might as well be a statue. They say it's for your safety. What they mean is, they don't want you going anywhere, especially not away. Art? You once painted a little scene of your garden. Nothing scandalous, just roses and birds and a fountain. You were proud of it. Showed it to a visiting countess, hoping for some kind of kindred appreciation. She smiled, tilted her head, and said, "Oh, how charming. You're quite clever for a princess." That was the last time you picked up a brush. The truth is, your talents are threats in disguise. A princess who paints? What if she paints something inappropriate? A princess who writes poetry? What if it contains opinions? Better to stay within the lines. Practice your stitches. Say your prayers. Smile at your husband. Keep your hands busy and your mind quiet. Here's a charming little historical oddity. In some courts, noble women's stitching was expected to include religious iconography and family crests, carefully woven into tapestries that could be displayed during feast days. So even your leisure time was just more propaganda. Each thread a reminder that your womb is also a banner. And still, you try to carve out spaces for yourself. Tiny moments of rebellion. You copy poems by hand in a secret journal, hidden in your sewing basket. You eavesdrop on diplomatic discussions behind the arras, just to hear the language of power spoken plainly. You play songs on your harp that sound cheerful, but are written in a key that only you know means mourning. You create quietly, carefully, dangerously. Because let's be honest, your mind is starving. You were born with thoughts that stretch beyond table placements and hem lengths. You want to understand the treaties your name is used in. You want to ask questions no one thinks you should ask. Why is that noble favoured over another? Why did the taxes go up in the western provinces? Why was the bishop really sent away last winter? But you don't ask. Not openly. You know better. You remember what happened to your aunt, the one who read Ovid and dared to ask why her husband was allowed to take a mistress. She didn't disappear exactly. She just became smaller. Her letters were intercepted. Her servants were replaced. She aged faster than time should allow. No one mentions her now unless it's to say she was too clever for her own good. So you fill your time with what's left. Endless rounds of embroidery, listening to your ladies recite gossip in whispers, praying in the chapel for strength, for patience, for something interesting to happen that doesn't involve disease or diplomacy. You walk in circles around the garden, counting stones, watching ants, naming birds. You learn which cracks in the courtyard freeze first in winter. You memorize the sound of your own sighs. Even when there's music and laughter and colour around you, you still feel the boredom pressing in like fog. Because it's not about the absence of things to do. It's about the absence of meaning. No one cares what you think. No one asks what you want. You are ornamental. A royal painting. A wax figure dressed in pearls. Scholars sometimes suggest that noble women were culturally enriched because of the art and education around them. And sure, on paper, you live in splendour. But splendour without agency is just a gilded cage. It doesn't matter how beautiful your prison is when you know you're not allowed to leave it. And so the boredom grows claws. It scratches at you in quiet moments. It curls under your ribs while you listen to a bishop drone on about humility. It itches just behind your eyes when someone praises your embroidery for the 7th time that week. You want to scream, but screaming isn't ladylike. Screaming gets you noticed in the wrong ways. So instead, you smile, and you wait. Because that's what princesses do. They wait. For news, for husbands, for childbirth, for death. And in between, they fill the hours with safe, silent hobbies until their minds forget how to want anything else. You've been scandalized. No, not in the way you might hope. No steamy tryst with a stable boy or dramatic escape across the countryside. This is worse. You sneezed during mass. Loudly. It echoed. You blotted your nose with your handkerchief like a mortal. And now, 3 days later, a monk has recorded that you appeared unwell and spiritually distracted. And just like that, the quiet, gossip engine of the court has sputtered to life again. This is the absurd reality you live in, where monks write the gossip columns and your soul is judged for having allergies. You don't get to have normal human moments anymore. Everything you do, even the tiniest twitch of an eyelid, ends up interpreted, recorded, whispered. You think you're just existing. The court thinks you're sending messages. You smile too long at a visiting ambassador. Political signal. You don't attend the Queen Mother's dinner. Insult. You wear blue twice in 1 week. Symbolic mourning. You frown in a chapel. Heretical. And of course, someone's always writing it down. That's the worst part. The scribes. The monks. The endless procession of ink-stained men hunched over their desks, dutifully preserving your most trivial missteps for posterity. You live your life under the soft scratch of quills. Every sigh, every stumble, every badly phrased comment, it's all inked onto parchment by people who barely know you and definitely don't like you. There's a monk in the scriptorium who seems particularly invested in your life. You catch him glancing at you during court events, squinting slightly as if trying to decode your soul. He probably thinks he's chronicling your virtues. In reality, he's collecting juicy footnotes. The princess appeared pale and did not partake of the fish course. That'll become a sign of your inner turmoil in 50 years when a bored scholar interprets it as the start of your downfall. You once asked to see what was being written about you, just once. The answer was a hard no. It is not fit for a lady to concern herself with matters of record, they said. Translation. We'll tell your story how we want, and your truth doesn't factor in. You're a character now. A symbol. Your life isn't lived, it's narrated. And because monks are human too, sometimes the stories they write are embellished. You blush once while speaking to a nobleman and it becomes, the princess showed unnatural fondness. You fall ill after a feast, and suddenly the record reads, rumours of curses persist. They don't lie outright. Oh no, that would be unholy. They just bend the truth until it's unrecognisable. Truth becomes suggestion. Suggestion becomes rumour. And rumour, written in ink, becomes fact. Want a delightfully bizarre fringe fact? In some cases, monks copied multiple versions of the same royal chronicle, with slightly different details depending on the intended audience. One version for local clergy, one for foreign courts, one for royal archives, which means that somewhere, right now, there are 3 completely different accounts of your life circulating through the libraries of Europe, and not one of them is accurate. And this matters. Oh, does it matter? Because these chronicles will outlive you. Long after you're dead and buried in a drafty cathedral, historians will study these records and draw conclusions. Did she smile too often? Did she seem clever? Too clever? Was she devout enough? Did she produce enough sons? Your whole identity will be compressed into a few paragraphs written by men who think a woman's silence is the highest virtue. So you start to play along. You cultivate your image like a gardener pruning thorns. You know which expressions are recordable. You wear modest colours during fasting seasons. You carry a prayer book even when you're just walking through the garden. You let your veil fall slightly over your eyes during Mass, not because you're overcome with piety, but because the monk in the corner has a habit of noting your devotional posture. This isn't vanity, it's survival. Because once something is written down, you can't undo it. There's no "that's not what I meant." No footnote saying, "actually, she was just tired." You don't get to write your own narrative, so instead you try to control the one being written about you. And even that doesn't guarantee safety. You once praised a new tapestry gifted by a rival duchy. It was a diplomatic gesture, a calculated nicety. Days later, the court's spiritual advisor mentioned your questionable taste in foreign art. It had pagan undertones, apparently. You saw birds and vines. He saw a Roman fertility symbol, and now you're being watched slightly more closely during Lent. Sometimes you wonder if they actually believe the things they write, if they think you really symbolise the fall of Christian womanhood because you chose almond oil over rose for your bath. Or if they're just bored. Maybe they're trying to stay awake at their desks and your life is the only exciting plot twist they've got. You once tried to make light of it. At a feast you joked that your melancholy expression was just indigestion from the eel stew. People laughed, softly, nervously, and the monk across the room wrote something down anyway. You later found out he'd noted that your words suggested a troubling lack of spiritual seriousness. Of course he did. This isn't just frustrating, it's terrifying. Because these written words don't just define how people see you, they can be used against you. The wrong interpretation can spark investigations, confession, punishment. You know of a duchess who was forced into a convent after an overzealous monk described her as too fond of solitude and candlelight. That was it. Solitude, candlelight, sinful. You start to censor yourself long before others do it for you. You smile more, laugh less, never cry in public, never appear too eager, never appear too cold, and you practice your most important skill, saying absolutely nothing in a way that sounds profoundly virtuous. The monks eat that up. The princess, though silent, radiated wisdom. Sure, let's go with that. Historians sometimes argue that noble women had more control over their image than we think, that through dress, patronage, and behaviour, they shaped the chronicles indirectly. That might be true, but shaping isn't the same as owning. You might polish the mirror, but you still don't get to hold it, and so you carry on, conscious of every quill, every scribbled line that will someday outlive your voice. You sit with perfect posture, smile at appropriate intervals, and hope that when the story of your life is told centuries from now, someone, anyone, will read between the lines and wonder who you really were. You develop a new paranoia over time, one that creeps in slowly like damp seeping through stone. It starts with a whisper, a side glance, a goblet left untouched at dinner. You laugh it off at first. How dramatic to think someone might poison you. You're not a rival queen or a warlord's widow. You're just a princess, a wife, a mother, a quietly bored woman surrounded by velvet and incense. But then it happens. Someone at court falls ill, not terribly, just enough, to stir suspicion. A steward clutches his stomach during a feast and doesn't recover. A maid collapses in the garden after sipping from the wrong cup. And suddenly, you're checking your wine for strange smells, watching your food for flickers of movement, wondering if the mint in your tea is meant to cover something up. Because in court life, poison is more common than gossip, and that's saying something. Forget the blade, forget the battlefield. This is a world where war happens in chalices and confections. Poison is the weapon of choice when the assassin needs to wear lace. It's clean, subtle, deniable, and it doesn't leave a trail, just a body, and a lot of awkward silence. Accusations are tricky. Proof is rarer than honesty in a noble marriage. And if someone does die suspiciously, the official story is always the same, an unfortunate illness. So, you become cautious, paranoid, strategic. You assign one of your ladies to sip your drinks before you do. Not openly, of course. You invent a ritual, some silly tradition of sharing blessings before meals. She thinks it's charming, You just want to make sure your kidneys survive another week. You start eating only from the centre of dishes. Nothing from the edges, where something could be sprinkled or dripped. You avoid pastries with fillings unless they come directly from the kitchens under your guard's watch. And you never eat anything gifted by another noblewoman unless it's in sealed wax and accompanied by a priest's blessing. You learn the signs: cinnamon used to disguise bitterness, milk to delay reactions, overly sweet wine that makes your tongue feel numb, and then there's the matter of your antidote. Yes, you have one. Everyone at court does. A little vial of some foul-tasting, mostly useless liquid you're supposed to carry just in case. No one really knows what's in it. Honey, crushed emeralds, maybe a pinch of superstition. You pretend it gives you peace of mind, but really it's just another performance. Something to hold on to when you're alone in your chamber, eyeing your plate like it might lunge at you. Want a curious little historical fact to ruin your appetite? In some royal households, test animals, usually dogs or birds, were used to sniff or taste food before banquets. Entire breeds were unofficially bred for the role. One poor creature named Bitter reportedly died during a coronation feast, after which the entire royal staff was replaced, and the cook was mysteriously retired. You'd laugh if it weren't so plausible, and it's not just food and drink. Poison can be laced into perfume, into ink, into gloves. One noblewoman lost all the skin from her fingers after receiving a pair scented with special oils. Another grew feverish after wearing a necklace coated in mercury. Some poisons work quickly, but the worst ones don't. The worst ones take days, weeks. They make you fade, thin out, lose colour, and no one blames poison. They blame sadness, melancholy, female humours, and that's the real horror, isn't it? That if you were poisoned, truly poisoned, no one would believe it. They'd say you were stressed, tired, perhaps emotionally unstable. You'd sit there in your chamber, coughing blood into a linen rag while your husband sighs at how fragile you've become. A priest would offer last rites. A monk would scribble something about your pious endurance. No one would ask what was in the wine. You start examining your staff with new eyes. Who's been hired recently? Who's new in the kitchens? Why did your lady-in-waiting flinch when you asked about the herbs used in your soup? And why did the chambermaid who helped you dress yesterday now walk with a limp and avoid your gaze? Still, you never say any of this out loud. Accusing someone of poison is dangerous. More dangerous than poison itself in some ways. It can start a feud, a blood feud. Families fall, alliances crumble. Accusations must be backed by more than gut feelings and tea that tastes off. And since no one wants to be the next scandal, everyone pretends not to notice. You cough politely, they look away politely. The court turns. Of course, you know the most likely suspects. Anyone with something to gain from your death. A rival princess, a political faction, a mistress you didn't know your husband had, the dowager queen, maybe, or just a bitter cousin who thinks the crown sits crooked on your family's head. Motives are never in short supply, and in a place where daggers are for show, poison is the real blade. But here's the sinister twist. Sometimes the fear of poison becomes worse than the poison itself. You find yourself declining feasts, avoiding banquets, refusing gifts. Your world shrinks, meal by cautious meal, until you're eating alone in your chamber with one hand on your spoon and the other on your antidote vial. You start dreaming of falling, of collapsing in the middle of a crowd, eyes wide, the last thing you see being your husband's surprised expression. Oh, he'll think. Not again. There's a debate among historians about how often poison was actually used in medieval courts. Some claim it was rare, exaggerated by fear and legend. Others argue it was widespread and simply unrecorded, disguised beneath layers of formal illness and hushed silence. Either way, the fear of it was real. Paranoia was a daily companion, and fear, as we know, can be just as deadly as poison itself. Eventually you stop tasting your food altogether. You eat because you must, not because you enjoy it. You drink water from your own guarded pitcher. You touch nothing unless it's been pre-approved, pre-sniffed, pre-tested. You even stop kissing your children goodnight without wiping your lips clean first, just in case. And the worst part, you don't know if this fear is justified or not. That's how well it works. Poison doesn't need to be real to ruin you. It only has to be possible. It only has to be whispered. Once it lives in your mind, it controls you. You're not ruling your household, you're dodging shadows. So you sit at your high-back chair, a golden goblet in your hand, your smile steady and your pulse a little too fast. The courtiers raise their glasses and drink. You pretend to sip, you pretend to swallow, you pretend that the burn in your throat is from the wine, and not from the thought that, tonight, someone might finally succeed. You smile so much your face hurts. Not just at feasts or ceremonies, but always. Your mouth is a permanent mask, your expression frozen in a state of polite delight, even when your soul is somewhere between mild resentment and full-blown psychological escape room. At court, every smile is a lie, mandatory, exhausting, and deeply strategic. Smiling isn't about happiness, it's about survival. You learn early on that silence can be deadly, but smiling is armor. People can't accuse you of rebellion if you're beaming like a painted saint. You become a master of the soft chuckle, the demure laugh, the pressed lip nod that says how interesting when what you mean is you're an idiot. You smile when someone insults you. You smile when they forget your name. You smile when the bishop implies you should pray harder for humility. You smile so they can't see you planning their funeral in your head. At court, everyone smiles. It's not just you, it's a collective performance, like some twisted theatre where the audience is also the cast. The duchess who can't stand you will still greet you with the warmth of a summer breeze and comment on how radiant you look, in a colour that absolutely washes you out. You return the compliment with equal venom dipped in honey. It's not a conversation, it's a duel. Fought with dimples. You know which smiles are real and which are knives. The too-wide grin of the cousin who wants your position. The polite tilt of the head from the noblewoman whose son just tried to grope your hand under the table. The tight-lipped nod from your husband after you suggest something at dinner that wasn't pre-approved by his advisors. These aren't smiles, they're warnings, and you respond with your own, carefully measured, sweet as curdled milk. Here's a historical tidbit that perfectly matches this smiling madness. In some royal courts, etiquette books specifically instructed noblewomen to smile modestly, without showing teeth and without upward creasing of the eyes. That's right. There was a manual for how to smile, a right way, a wrong way, a way that meant, I'm agreeable, but not flirtatious, a way that meant, I'm pleased but not too pleased. You were allowed to be beautiful, but not too expressive. Emotional containment was the ultimate virtue, and this is where it starts to mess with your mind. You spend so much time smiling that you forget what your real face looks like. The muscles around your eyes stop reacting, naturally. Your jaw becomes tired from holding the same pleasant angle all day. When you finally retreat to your chamber and look in the mirror, you see a stranger. Her cheeks raised, her lips curved, but her eyes? Hollow, exhausted, detached. That's the thing about constant performance. It bleeds into your real self. At first you only fake it in public. Then you do it during meals with family. Then during prayers. Eventually you catch yourself smiling when you're completely alone, like your face has forgotten how to relax. You try to frown just to remember how. It feels foreign, wrong, dangerous. Because frowning gets noticed, so does silence. So does any sign that you're not 100% serene, content, and full of gratitude for your charmed life. If you look tired, you're delicate. If you look serious, you're moody. If you look sad, heaven forbid, you're ungrateful, difficult, a cause for concern. You're expected to smile through childbirth, through illness, through betrayal, through grief. If your heart breaks, it had better do so privately and attractively. And yes, even your grief is judged. After your last miscarriage, you were instructed to rest, pray, and attend vespers with grace. When you cried in the chapel, one of the duchesses touched your shoulder and murmured, "You're very brave." But the next day you overheard her whispering that your display had been excessive. Next time you promise yourself you'll weep behind the altar, or better yet, not at all. People talk about beauty, about charm, about bearing. But what they mean is your ability to perform happiness, to look like you're grateful to be imprisoned in brocade, to make misery look like virtue, and if you dare to stop, if your smile falters even once, it's not just noticed, it's remembered. You become folklore in your own lifetime. Did you see her expression at the banquet? She looked strained. I think she's jealous. I heard she's unhappy in the marriage. Do you think she's barren again? No one asks you. They ask each other, behind fans, over goblets of spiced wine, between dances. And if you're lucky, the rumours fade. If not, they become stories in the next monk's chronicle. And speaking of monks, yes, they notice too. A court chronicler once praised you for your serene and ever-joyful demeanour, which sounds lovely until you realise it's code for compliant. The kind of princess who doesn't make trouble, doesn't raise her voice, doesn't frown when a visiting noble makes a lewd remark. You're not celebrated for being kind or brave or intelligent. You're celebrated for being smilingly silent. Historians still argue over whether these expressions of joy in noble portraits and letters were genuine or performative. Most agree that they were carefully curated. Artists painted idealised versions of their subjects. Letter writers included obligatory compliments and cheerful lines even when discussing death or hardship. Smiling became shorthand for everything is under control, even when it absolutely wasn't. So, you keep smiling. When your husband speaks over you, when a feast is held in your name but no one lets you speak, when your daughter is married off to a stranger and cries quietly into her sleeves, when your father congratulates you for keeping the court calm. You smile until your teeth ache and your soul recedes like a tide pulling away from the shore. One day you catch a glimpse of a servant girl laughing, loudly, unguarded. It's a wild, spontaneous thing full of snorts and crooked teeth. It's ugly, raw, real, and for a moment it makes you furious. Not at her, but at how long it's been since you laughed like that, since you felt anything real enough to forget your face. But the moment passes, you adjust your veil, smooth your sleeves, and smile. Because that's what princesses do. You think the jesters are harmless? That's the mistake. They wear bells, paint their faces, stumble dramatically, and everyone laughs. So surely they're safe, right? Wrong. The jester is the most dangerous person in the room because he's allowed to say what no one else can. And when he laughs at you, the court listens. At first, you find them amusing, a break in the tension, someone who isn't watching you with calculation in their eyes. He tells a joke about a greedy duke, and the duke laughs loudest of all, because that's how survival works here. You clap politely, relieved to enjoy something without consequence. Then one evening the joke is about you. Not directly, of course. Never directly, that would be rude. It's a story about a golden bird locked in a tower who sings beautifully but never flies. Everyone chuckles, you smile, you're very good at that. The jester bows in your direction, just a fraction too low, just a fraction too long. And suddenly you feel it, that tightening in your stomach. This isn't humour, this is commentary. You realise then that jesters are weapons, social ones. They mock without accusation. They criticise without consequences, and the truly clever ones never say anything that can be punished. They imply, they gesture, they let the audience draw the line themselves. If anyone complains, it's brushed off with a grin. It was only a joke, but jokes linger. After that performance, a noble woman you barely know smiles at you and says, "Such a delicate bird." A courtier asks if you've been enjoying the tower gardens lately. Someone hums the tune the jester played while performing. It's subtle, but it's everywhere. You've been labelled, and labels stick. You don't get to clap back. You can't defend yourself. If you object, you have no sense of humour. If you ignore it, you're confirming the joke. Either way, the story spreads. You've been flattened into a caricature. Fragile, ornamental, passive. Something to be admired and pitied in equal measure. And here's the real danger. Jesters don't just mock individuals. They shape public perception. Their songs travel faster than letters, faster than official proclamations. A ballad sung in a marketplace will be remembered long after a treaty's forgotten. If a jester turns you into a punchline, congratulations. You've been immortalised in the worst possible way. There's a fringe historical truth that's equal parts fascinating and terrifying. Some jesters were unofficial political commentators used by kings to test public reaction. If a joke landed well, it revealed what people were thinking but afraid to say. If it didn't, the king could shrug and say, it was only the fool. The fool, meanwhile, walked away with a pocket full of coins and a head still attached. So when the jester starts making jokes about silent queens, or wives who smile while their husbands rule. It's not random, it's a temperature check. And the laughter that follows tells you more than any council meeting ever could. You begin to dread performances, not because you dislike humour, but because you never know if tonight's entertainment includes you. You sit straighter, you watch the jester's eyes, you analyse every metaphor. Was that dragon greedy or jealous? Was that princess clever or merely obedient? Was the queen in the song admired or mocked? Sometimes the jokes cut close to truths you've never said out loud. A jester once tells a story about a woman who speaks 7 languages, but is only praised for her dress. The court roars with laughter. You feel something sharp twist in your chest. Is he mocking you or mourning you? And does it matter if the result is the same? You consider asking your husband to intervene, to ask that certain themes be avoided. But that would only confirm the joke had landed. Worse, it would suggest you felt targeted, sensitive, humourless. So you say nothing. You laugh politely. You play your part. Again. And then there are the songs. Those are worse. Songs stick. A jester's song can follow you for decades. Sung by children who don't know your name. Whistled by guards who don't know your face. Long after you're gone, the melody will remain, carrying whatever version of you the jester decided was funniest. Some jesters are kind, truly. They mock power, not people. They punch up. But others sense weakness the way sharks sense blood. They see your constraints, your silence, your inability to respond, and they exploit it. Because what are you going to do? Imprison the court entertainer for doing his job? That never looks good. Especially when the crowd is laughing. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether jesters actually had more freedom of speech than any other group in medieval society. Many historians think so. Their role gave them plausible deniability. They could criticise the church, the nobility, even the monarch under the cover of absurdity. And while that sometimes made them voices of truth, it also made them dangerous narrators. And you, unfortunately, are excellent material. You're visible, restricted, symbolic, everything a good satirical character needs. You represent order, beauty, and restraint, the perfect foil for chaos and commentary. The more perfectly you perform your role, the easier it is to parody. One night, a jester performs a skit about a queen, who nods so often her neck nearly snaps. The court howls. You laugh too, because not laughing would be worse. But later, alone in your chamber, you press your fingers to your throat and realise how much it hurts. How often you nod. How rarely you speak. You start to notice changes. People interrupt you more. They finish your sentences. They treat your opinions like decorative flourishes rather than substance. You're no longer just quiet. You're known for being quiet. The joke has crystallised into identity. You consider turning the joke on its head, being louder, more assertive, but the risk is enormous. If you suddenly change, you'll be mocked again, this time as inconsistent, unstable, not herself. The court loves consistency, even when it's unfair. So you do what you always do. You adapt. You become even more controlled, more composed. You learn to weaponize stillness, to let silence stretch until it makes others uncomfortable. You speak less, but when you do, you make it count. You let people underestimate you. After all, a joke cuts both ways. If they're laughing, they're not watching closely. Still, the damage is done. Somewhere someone is singing a silly rhyme about a smiling queen. Somewhere else, a child is pretending to bow and nod exaggeratedly, copying a performance they don't understand. Your legacy is already being written, set to music, wrapped in humour and stripped of nuance. And you realise something chilling. History doesn't always remember truth. It remembers what was entertaining. You lie awake that night listening to distant laughter echo down stone corridors. You wonder how many people have become legends not because of who they were, but because someone made them funny. And you understand, finally, that in a court where you're never allowed to speak freely, being laughed at is just another way of being silenced. So tomorrow, when the jester performs again, you'll sit in your place. You'll watch. You'll smile. You'll clap. And you'll wonder which version of you is being born this time, because once it's sung, you'll never quite be able to erase it. You've always known the phrase, locked in a tower. It's in every bedtime story, every bard's song. A beautiful maiden gazes out over the kingdom, waiting to be rescued. Birds perch on windowsills. Maybe there's a dragon. Maybe there's a prince. Always a happy ending. But that's the fairy tale. In your world, being locked in a tower is not a metaphor. It's a policy. A very real, very drafty punishment reserved for women who step out of line, and you're starting to realise just how thin the line is. It starts with a door, one that clicks shut behind you louder than it ever has before. The locks aren't immediately visible, and the guards smile politely, still calling you my lady. But something is different. There's a shift in tone, a new firmness. They don't announce it as a sentence. There's no dramatic declaration of exile. Just subtle movements, fewer visitors, restricted walks, your favourite maid suddenly reassigned for her health. You ask questions, you get quiet apologies, you insist. The answers dry up completely. And then you notice the silence. No music drifts through your chamber, no bustle of servants, no footsteps in the hallways except the guard's shift changes. Regular, rhythmic, always the same. The air smells different here. Colder, less perfumed, damp. The stone has a way of seeping into your bones like it's whispering you're not going anywhere. You haven't officially done anything wrong. That's the worst part. You've just made someone nervous. Maybe you spoke too boldly. Maybe you aligned with the wrong side during a court dispute. Maybe you didn't smile enough at the right person. Maybe your womb has been empty too long. No one will say. That way, there's no one to blame. You're not in a dungeon. Don't flatter yourself. You still have your tapestries, your writing desk, your polished mirror. You're still a princess. But the tower is a softer kind of prison. Less blood, more embroidery. It's the place they put you when they don't want to kill you, just erase you. You become a sort of ghost in your own life, mentioned occasionally, remembered, vaguely, no longer invited. You try to keep your routine at first. Wake up, pray. Read the same 2 books. Walk in the same little circle on the same little terrace under the same grey sky. But the boredom hits differently now. Before it was a symptom. Now it's a sentence. Every day is a copy of the last and time begins to lose its shape. You try to mark the days in a notebook. That works for a while, until it doesn't. There's a grim, fringe fact from one of the German courts. A noblewoman accused of heresy was locked in a tower for 18 years. She went mad by year 6. By year 10, she had convinced herself she could fly. No one stopped her from trying. You're not there yet. But the walls are beginning to hum. The silence presses against your ears like water. You speak out loud sometimes just to hear a voice. You sing, not because you're joyful, but because the quiet becomes unbearable. You talk to birds, to your reflection, to the saints whose portraits hang crookedly on your chamber wall. You start to see patterns in the stone. You remember your cousin who vanished years ago after offending the wrong nobleman. Everyone said she'd married and moved to the countryside. But now you wonder. Was she sent to a tower like this? Did she press her face to a window until her skin turned pale and her eyes forgot how to look at anything but clouds? The most disturbing thing is how easy it is to disappear. One moment, you're in the centre of the feast hall exchanging pleasantries and nodding at ambassadors. The next, you're alone, with your life shrunk down to 4 stone walls and a view of treetops. People stop mentioning you. They stop asking about you. And if they do, they're told you're taking time for your health. It's the nobility's favourite euphemism. Always health, never politics. There are debates among scholars about how often noblewomen were truly imprisoned in towers versus convents versus private estates. Some argue that towers are symbolic, a literary device. Others point to letters, records, and abandoned keeps where highborn women lived out the ends of their lives in what was essentially house arrest. You don't care which side is right. You're living it. You're the footnote in someone's argument now. At night, the loneliness becomes sharp. You lie in your canopied bed, surrounded by silks and furs, and it doesn't matter. You're still cold. You think of your family and wonder who misses you. You think of the people you once dined with, danced with, traded half smiles with across the court. You wonder who whispered your name into the wrong ear. You wonder who's glad you're gone. And yet you hold on to some sliver of defiance. You stop smiling at the guards. You stop pretending to enjoy the soup. You refuse to stitch another sampler. If they're going to forget you, you'll at least go down uncooperative. You're not a golden bird, you're a caged one, and caged birds eventually stop singing. Sometimes you write letters. You don't know if they'll be delivered. You suspect most end up in a fire before reaching anyone's hands. But still, you write. Letters to your sister, to your daughter, to the woman you used to be. You sign them with your full title, even though you know it means nothing now. Once, you climb higher. There's a spiral staircase that leads to the upper room of the tower, a place no one ever mentions. You climb it slowly, barefoot, the stone cold against your skin. At the top is a small circular room with narrow windows and a rotting wooden chair. No one has cleaned it in years. You sit there, just to feel like you've gone somewhere. Just to see the horizon. The sun sets slowly. You watch every minute of it. You think about escape, not dramatically. No daring leaps or ropes made of bed sheets. You just think about not being here. A garden, a boat, a cloister where you could read without being watched. But even those daydreams feel too big now. You don't need freedom. You'd settle for a door without a lock. And when you finally go back downstairs, something in you has changed. You're still here. Still locked in, but you're not broken. Not yet. And maybe that's something. Maybe being forgotten isn't the same as being erased. Still, you know this. The tower is real. The story just never tells you what happens to the girl after the dragon leaves and the prince never shows up. You already know the answer. She waits. She grows quiet. She becomes a ghost in velvet, and the court moves on. You're released from the tower, eventually. Not with a parade or even a formal announcement. Just a servant sent to help you pack. No one says what you did to deserve confinement, and no one says why it's suddenly safe for you to return. That's the nature of royal punishment. No one ever tells you when it starts or when it ends. You're simply shuffled into place like a chess piece someone forgot for a few turns. When you re-enter court life, everything looks exactly the same, but nothing feels right. The candles burn with their usual glow, the musicians play their usual tunes, and the courtiers say all the same empty things. But when they smile at you now, there's something else behind it. Curiosity maybe, or fear. You've been away. That means something. It makes you interesting again. Dangerous. And then there's your husband. Oh, him. He greets you with the enthusiasm of someone reuniting with a misplaced coat. He kisses your hand, asks after your health, and says, "You've grown quieter." As if that's a compliment. As if you didn't have to learn silence like a second language in that tower. You try to slide back into your old role, attend the feasts, smile at the ambassadors, host your tedious little teas with the other noblewomen, but something in you doesn't bend quite the same way anymore. You're harder now, less willing to tolerate the polite nonsense, and unfortunately, that makes you noticeable. Again, still, your role is the same. Wife, princess, symbol of royal stability, which means smiling at your husband's jokes, nodding politely when he explains your own estate accounts to you like you've never seen a ledger, and, here's the fun part, being faithful, even when he absolutely isn't. Because marriage, for a medieval princess, is not a partnership. It's a Cold War in formal wear. Infidelity is expected from him, practically celebrated. He has mistresses, sure, but not in the scandalous way that requires discretion. No, these women are courted publicly, escorted to court events, and sometimes gifted rings you never got. And you're expected to rise above it, to nod, to smile, to embrace the mistress like a sister and welcome her presence with dignity. You're told this is your role, that kings and princes must have lovers, that it's healthy, that your job is not to possess his love but to provide heirs and a peaceful home. As if peace can bloom in a garden full of betrayal. As if you're a particularly pleasant throw pillow meant to brighten the throne room. But what happens when you dare to step out of line? What if you so much as smile too warmly at a knight? The consequences are instant. Whispers, accusations. Your reputation becomes a fragile sheet of ice everyone's watching, waiting for the crack. Because his infidelity is indulgence, but yours would be treason. That's the sick little twist of medieval marriage. It's not about love. It's not even about loyalty. is about ownership. He owns your body, your titles, your future. He can humiliate you, ignore you, or discard you emotionally. But if you act out, you risk exile, or worse. Let's add a particularly charming historical fact. In some royal courts, queens and princesses were required to have their bedsheets inspected after wedding nights to prove their virginity. If there was no blood, that could be grounds for annulment. Meanwhile, your husband could bed half the duchy with no consequence, and people would toast him for his vitality. So yes, you understand the game, but that doesn't mean you have to like it. You start to play your own version. Small acts of rebellion. Subtle ones. You stop asking for your husband's approval before making decisions in your own household. You begin meeting with your steward alone. You donate funds to religious houses that he dislikes, always under the guise of piety. You wear colours that he says don't suit you, and when he comments, you smile and wear them again. But the real war happens in whispers. In the drawing rooms, the cloisters, the shaded corners of the chapel where women gather like a storm front. You hear the stories. The duchess whose husband left her for her maid. The noblewoman who faked her own madness to escape court. The countess who took a lover and disappeared, officially struck down by fever, unofficially tossed into a monastery where she's still not allowed to speak. You begin to understand marriage here is not a union, it's a chessboard, and the pieces are sharp. There's a scholar who once wrote that medieval noble marriages were performative alliances, wherein affection was optional and trust was impractical. That's putting it politely. More honestly, it's a bloodless battle you're expected to lose with grace, and yet, every now and then, there are moments. He looks at you with something almost like respect. You share a private joke. You remember that once, long ago, you thought this man might be your partner. Those moments never last. But they're enough to confuse you, enough to make you hesitate, enough to remind you that even poison can have a sweet taste. You wonder what would happen if you simply walked away. Packed a bag, left the jewels and vanished into the hills. But that's not an option, of course. A princess can't vanish. She can only fall. And the higher she stands, the farther she has to drop. So you stay. You learn to win arguments with silence, to undermine without offending. You take up falconry, not because you enjoy it, but because it's the one place he doesn't follow. You become a master of your own face, your own time, your own damn story. But deep down, you know something ugly and unavoidable. You're married to your rival, not a partner, not a protector, a man who smiles at you in public and builds walls around you in private, who expects loyalty without offering it, who can undo your life with a single word and expects you to thank him for his restraint. You sit beside him at feast after feast, your fingers gently resting on the table between you. He speaks, you nod, he laughs, you smile. The courtiers watch, the musicians play, and above all of it, you feel the battle continue, quiet, civil, and endless. Because medieval marriage isn't a fairy tale, it's a war, and you're the prize and the battlefield. You give birth in a room full of strangers, midwives, noblewomen, a priest, a few curious maids who should have been dismissed hours ago. They're all there, hovering in your chamber as you sweat and scream and fight to bring another royal life into the world. Privacy, in this moment, is a luxury no one believes you deserve. After all, you're not just a woman giving birth. You're a royal vessel, a baby machine, and your labour is political. It's supposed to be a celebration, a miracle. But it doesn't feel like one. It feels like a trial, like a grim performance where pain is expected and dignity is optional. You're laid out like an offering, every contraction observed and analysed. Is the labour progressing? Are you strong enough? Is the heir on the way? And underneath it all, will she survive? No one talks about the fear, but it's in the room, thick as the blood on your sheets. You know the odds. You've seen too many funerals for women younger than you. 1 in 5, maybe higher, depending on the year, depending on your luck. Your royalty, sure, but even that can't save you from a uterus turned against itself. Infection, hemorrhage, fever. You're reminded over and over again that your title might protect your name, but it won't protect your body. The baby comes. There's a pause, a long suffocating moment where everything stops, then a cry, and the room erupts in relief. It's a boy. You're safe. For now. The nurse holds him up for the court to see, swaddled in white like a trophy. You, the person who just survived the most excruciating experience of your life, are barely acknowledged. A soft, well done, maybe a pat on the hand, and then you're left to bleed and shake while the men toast in the next room. They take him. Of course they do. You're allowed to hold him briefly. He's warm, pink, perfect. You want to weep from the weight of him, from the love you didn't expect to feel so fast. But the moment is short. He's handed to a wet nurse, then whisked off to the nursery wing. You're not even consulted. He's not yours, not really. He belongs to the kingdom, to legacy, to the men with rings and scrolls and bloodless ambitions, and this is what no one warns you about. Royal mothers don't get to be mothers. You'll see him again, sure, at appointed times when it's convenient. But he'll be raised by tutors and nurses and political strategy. You're allowed to be present, but not too present. Affection is considered dangerous. Over-involvement is suspicious. A princess who mothers too fiercely might try to influence her son's politics, and we can't have that. So you become a kind of ceremonial mother, a warm figurehead, a designated lap for feast days. You write letters to his tutors suggesting gentler correction, or more time outdoors, and they nod politely, then ignore you completely. You begin to track your child's moods by proxy, how his nurse describes him, how his tutors discuss his progress, whether he smiles when he sees you or flinches at unfamiliar contact. And the next time you give birth, it's the same, all over again. Maybe it's a girl this time. If so, the disappointment will be subtle but palpable. Courtiers will murmur about next time. Your husband will touch your hand and say, "She's lovely," while already planning how to use her as a political bargaining chip. You will name her something sweet and elegant and cry when they take her away, because even daughters are claimed by the court. There's a horrifying historical account of a queen whose child died in infancy, and she wasn't informed until days later. The reasoning? She was emotionally delicate and needed to be preserved for future pregnancies. They buried her baby while she rested in a perfumed bed, none the wiser. They meant it as kindness. It sounds like cruelty to you. You try to stay close to your children, in whatever ways you're allowed. You sew little tokens for them, embroidered cloths, tiny slippers. You bribe servants for scraps of news. Sometimes, you sneak into the nursery during odd hours when no one's watching, and hold them as they sleep. You whisper stories they'll never remember. You sing lullabies that were never meant for courts, and always you fear for them. Fevers, accidents, poison, ambition. The dangers are endless, and you can't protect them from most of it. You can only pray, and you do. Even if your faith has frayed, you still find yourself in the chapel long after midnight, begging saints you barely believe in to let your babies grow up. You hear the whispers, of course, that you're too attached, that you spend too much time in the nursery, that you delay official duties to be with your children. You're supposed to be a mother, but only in name. Anything more is political meddling, emotional instability. A sign you might be unfit for your real duties. Because here's the brutal truth. Your body is sacred when it's carrying a child, but expendable once the child is born. You are cherished only for what you can produce. A vessel, a breeder, a temporary necessity. There's an ongoing scholarly debate about whether royal women had maternal power behind the scenes, if perhaps they wielded influence quietly, shaped policy through whispered conversations and subtle pressure. Some say yes, that motherhood gave queens soft authority. Others argue the opposite, that once a child was born, the mother's usefulness diminished, and she became a background figure, more myth than person. You live that debate daily. You try to be more than ceremonial. You read your children's lessons and offer suggestions. You slip books into their chambers that the tutors wouldn't dare assign. You give them advice in the few stolen moments you're allowed, hoping something sticks. But you know the truth. You're not raising them. You're haunting their childhood. Sometimes they cry for you. You hear it from behind doors. You're not allowed to comfort them directly, not always. It's disruptive. Inappropriate. Not the time. And the guilt curdles in your stomach like spoiled milk. You are their mother in every way except the one that matters. Presence. And the older they get, the harder it becomes. Your sons learn to bow and debate before they learn to hug. Your daughters are taught to be obedient and pleasant before they learn to run, and you watch them turn into the next generation of polite prisoners just like you. You wonder what they'll remember, if they'll think of you as distant or loving, if the few precious moments you shared will be enough, if they'll know you fought for them in the only ways you could, quietly, consistently, invisibly. Because that's what royal mothers do. They love from a distance, and hope that one day their children will come close enough to love them back. You wake up one morning feeling off. Not sick exactly, not enough to call for a physician, but off. You sit up slower than usual. Your bones ache like it's midwinter, though the hearth still glows with warmth. You catch your reflection in the mirror and there it is, the beginning of a frown. Nothing dramatic, no sobbing, no dishevelment, just the slightest downturn of your mouth, the smallest tremor beneath your eyelids. You smooth your hair, adjust your veil, practice your smile, but it's still there, a crack. By lunch, 3 people have commented on it. You seem pale today, Your Grace. Perhaps a walk in the gardens would lift your spirits. My lady, you aren't troubled, are you? You force your lips into the proper shape, the one that says, I'm fine, I'm pleasant, I am the picture of royal composure. But you already know, you've been noticed, and being sad, visibly sad, isn't safe. You'd think, of all the things, sorrow would be allowed. After all, you're a princess, not a marble statue. You've buried children, lost friends, spent years trapped in roles that grind your soul down like flour. Surely you're allowed a quiet moment, a sigh, a day where your eyes are a little dim. But no, not here. Not in a palace where everything is performance and perception. In court, melancholy is dangerous. It's interpreted, dissected, and worst of all, weaponized. A sad princess isn't seen as human. She's seen as unstable, possibly cursed, possibly plotting. After all, why would a woman with wealth, jewels, servants, and a place beside power not be happy? The idea that you might simply be exhausted is too mundane for this place. Sadness must mean something. It wasn't always this way. When you were younger, a little grief was even romantic. The pensive princess, it made the poets write about you, your name softly trailing from the lips of lute players. But now you're older. Now sadness makes people nervous, and when courtiers get nervous, things begin to happen. Subtle things. Your maid is replaced with someone more cheerful. You find a sprig of lavender tucked under your pillow to ease your mood. A priest lingers in your chapel visits and begins asking oddly specific questions about your dreams. One morning you're invited, gently, to a healing supper, hosted by a noblewoman known for her fondness for leeches and overly spiritual tea. And then come the warnings. A note slipped under your door. You're being watched. A whispered comment from an old friend. You might want to appear more joyful for your own sake. A joke from a jester that lands a little too pointedly. Better a mad woman in the tower than a weeping queen at court. Everyone laughs. You do too. Inside, you want to scream. Here's your strange but true historical nugget. The concept of melancholia in the medieval world wasn't just sadness. It was considered a real medical condition, a dangerous one. Caused by an imbalance of black bile, it was believed to lead to idleness, rebellion, and even possession. Women in particular were thought to be especially vulnerable. A princess showing signs of melancholy could be labelled unstable, hysterical, or if you were truly unlucky, a witch. Yes, witchcraft. It sounds dramatic, but you know the line is thin. Too thin. Women who strayed outside the expected emotional spectrum were often accused of supernatural influence. A noblewoman who stopped attending feasts, who wept without clear cause, who muttered prayers too quietly or too often. Suddenly she was no longer pious. She was suspect. So you do what you must. You adjust. You paint brightness onto your face with powders and forced laughter. You rehearse small pleasantries in your head like battle tactics. You hum during your embroidery so your maids will report a pleasant mood. You host a tea with extra honey cakes and read aloud something uplifting. You smile so hard your cheeks throb, and it works. The court exhales. The tension drops. You are well again. No one speaks of the dark circles beneath your eyes. No one asks how you're truly feeling. They just want you to be manageable again, palatable, safe. But inside, you know something has shifted. You're no longer just playing a role, you're faking your own sanity. Performing joy so convincingly, you might just forget what actual joy felt like. And worse, the moment has passed. The opportunity to be real, to express sorrow, to grieve, it's gone. There's no going back now. If you slip again, if the smile drops a second time, it won't be seen as sadness. It'll be seen as instability. The first time was concern. The second time is evidence. There's a rumour that reaches you a week later that you've been seen praying too often and speaking to no one. Someone mentions that perhaps she's hearing things. Someone else notes that your grandmother, remember her, had a nervous disposition too. And just like that, you're half a sentence away from being labelled unfit, from being sent away, from being removed. Some scholars argue that the mental health of medieval noblewomen was handled with more compassion than we give credit for, that spiritual guidance, herbal remedies and rest were offered as legitimate help. But others point to the many records of women confined to convents or locked away for simply expressing distress. Hysteria was a convenient excuse. Emotional women were easier to silence than to understand. You've learned that now. So, you rebuild your performance. You re-enter the feast hall like a woman reborn. You compliment your enemies. You dance with charm. You laugh when you're supposed to. You cry only in private and only into linens you later burn. You become so convincingly cheerful that your husband actually says, "You seem yourself again." You nod. You say, "Of course." But you're not yourself. You're the version of yourself that survives. And late at night, when the mask slips, when the grief creeps in again, as it always does, you kneel by your bed and pray not for joy but for invisibility. Because that's the safest emotion of all. Not love, not rage, not even sorrow, just a quiet, forgettable stillness. You're sent to a convent. Not because you sinned, exactly, or because anyone can point to a particular crime. It's more strategic. You're told it's for reflection, for rest, for devotion. The official phrase is a retreat for her spiritual nourishment. It sounds noble, soothing, clean. But the truth, as always, isn't dressed in velvet. It's hidden in the folds. Everyone knows what it really means. You've become inconvenient. Maybe you were asking too many questions. Maybe your husband grew tired of your silences. Too long, too pointed. Maybe your son has finally reached the age where he no longer needs a mother hovering nearby. Or maybe your quiet sadness, too expertly contained, still unsettles the court. And unsettling people, even subtly, even unintentionally, is dangerous when you're a royal woman. So off you go. The carriage ride to the convent is long and cold. They send you with a few attendants, a guard, and a letter from the king that mentions our beloved consort and her journey of pious reflection. You stare out the window the whole time, watching the forest pass by like a silent audience. You used to imagine the convent as a place of peace, a sanctuary, a quiet escape. Now it feels like exile with a steeple. You arrive at the gates under grey skies. The convent walls are high and damp, spotted with moss. A nun greets you with a kind of smile that could be genuine or rehearsed. You're ushered inside, past the chapel, past the gardens, to a small room with a hard bed and no windows. There's no feast, no formal welcome. You're not a princess here. You're a soul to be corrected. Your days are suddenly filled with structure. Dawn prayers, cold baths, silent meals, sewing circles that feel more like interrogation sessions with needles. The rules come fast and without mercy. No speaking during meals, no looking into the eyes of the abbess without permission, no letters without approval. Your gowns are taken. You're given plain robes that smell of lye and damp wool. Your jewels are locked away for safekeeping. No one says when you'll get them back. You're not here to be honoured. You're here to be reduced. There's a historical debate about the role of convents in medieval society. Some scholars argue they were liberating, a rare space where women could gain education, leadership, even a voice. Others describe them as gilded prisons, designed to quietly remove inconvenient women from political life without the drama of a trial or the scandal of an execution. After a few weeks inside, you begin to see both sides. The convent is peaceful. It is orderly. It's also a place where you can be forgotten without protest. The nuns watch you closely. They listen when you speak. They ask polite questions about your marriage, your thoughts, your habits, always under the guise of spiritual concern. But their eyes are sharp, practiced. They're not just holy women, they're survivors, and they recognize you as something fragile and foreign, a falcon clipped of its wings, trying to act like a dove. You try to adjust. You memorize the Psalms. You fold your hands correctly. You attend Vespers, Matins, Compline. You do not complain, not aloud. But inside, your thoughts remain wild, furious, confused. Some days you feel peace, yes, but not the kind they want you to find. It's not submission, it's disconnection. You detach like armour. You float through your days like smoke. And sometimes you meet others like you. Hidden among the sisters are other noblewomen, relics of broken alliances, disgraced wives, unmarried daughters deemed too clever for court. One was a queen's cousin. Another was once married to a general and then quietly reassigned after her husband's death. They speak to you in whispers, late at night, behind cloister walls, telling half-truths and coded stories. One shows you a hidden mural in the library, a depiction of a female saint. Not one of the well-behaved ones. This saint carries a sword. Her eyes are wide. Her hands are stained red. The nun smiles slightly and says, "Not all devotion is meekness." You don't know whether to laugh or cry. There's a fringe fact for you. Some medieval convents had secret traditions of resistance, hidden artworks, forbidden texts, even coded letters sent to royal courts using psalm numbers as ciphers. Some women didn't just survive here. They organised, protected each other, fought back in silence and symbols. You begin to understand that the convent isn't just a prison. It's a mirror. It shows you who you are when no one's watching. And some days, that's almost worse. Because without the court, the titles, the gowns, the feast days, who are you? Are you still a princess if there's no throne beneath you? Are you still a mother if your children forget your voice? Are you still a woman if you no longer feel desire, just ritual? Weeks turn into months. The letters from court grow fewer. Your name disappears from prayers. The outside world forgets you with alarming efficiency. But you remain. You breathe. You endure. And slowly, you find something else blooming inside you. Not joy exactly, but clarity. You realize that your entire life has been a stage. And now, in this cold, quiet convent, the curtain has finally dropped. So you ask yourself, do you miss the applause? Or are you glad to finally rest your voice? One evening, while walking the herb garden, you notice something sprouting through the stones. Wild thyme, untamed and thriving. You crouch to touch it, let the scent fill your nose, and for the first time in weeks you smile. Not the practiced court smile, a real one, soft, private, alive. You may be locked away, but they didn't silence you, not really. When the messenger arrives, he's so nervous you almost feel sorry for him. His hands shake as he passes you the scroll sealed with the royal crest, edges damp from the fog outside the convent walls. You've been here long enough that the sight of the seal feels unreal, like a dream you used to have every night and eventually gave up hoping for. The ink has barely dried. The words are formal, distant, and dripping with carefully measured urgency. Her Grace is summoned to return to court, her presence requested for matters of dynastic importance. Translation: someone wants something, the nuns help you pack. Your robes are folded neatly, the few possessions you arrived with returned without comment. No one says goodbye. There's no need. This isn't a triumphal return, it's a reactivation. The court didn't remember you until it needed you again. You're no longer a soul in need of correction. You're a tool that might still be sharp enough to cut. You ride in silence. The road back is familiar, but it feels longer this time. Or maybe you've just changed too much since you last travelled it. You still wear the habits of the convent, literally and otherwise. Plain clothes, simple hair, a face unadorned. But inside there's something harder now. Colder. You don't mistake the summons for kindness. You've learned better. When you return, the court greets you like a painting brought out of storage, admired for its preservation, not its presence. Everyone speaks of how well you look, how peaceful you must have felt in such a serene setting, how court has missed your tranquility. You nod, you smile. You don't mention that the silence in the convent was less peace and more slow erasure. You're summoned directly to the council chamber, bypassing all the usual formalities. That's how you know something's wrong. You sit at the edge of the long oak table, surrounded by men whose names you've heard whispered over chessboards and prayer books. Your husband is there, older, somehow more rigid. He doesn't smile. He doesn't say your name. They explain the situation. Your son, your firstborn, is now of age, and there is unrest surrounding the question of succession. Nobles are split. Factions are forming. His marriage must be arranged carefully, with the right alliances. And the people? The people have begun to chant songs in the streets, not all of them flattering. Rumours circulate that the bloodline has weakened, that the royal line has lost its divine favour, and this is where you come in. You're to give a speech, a public blessing, appear beside your son at his first formal address, reassure the court that all is well, that you support him, that the line is strong, you, who are too emotional to be seen, you who are too sad to be trusted. Now they need your image, your legend, your motherhood. Your first instinct is laughter, not the polite court kind, the kind that bubbles from somewhere dark and tired and utterly done. But you catch it before it rises. You nod. You say the right things. Of course, an honour, for the good of the realm. And here's the twisted irony. You're good at this. You've always been good at this. You take your role back like slipping into an old dress. It still fits, too well. You appear at the feast beside your son, tall and composed. You kiss his cheek and say the line the scribe prepared for you. A mother's pride, a kingdom's promise. The crowd eats it up. You are once again a symbol, but behind the scenes the cracks show. Your son barely looks at you. He's been raised by strategy and cold affection. He doesn't remember your lullabies, your whispered prayers behind nursery walls. He knows you only as the distant figure who blessed him during feast days. His loyalty lies with the men who moulded him, not the woman who carried him. And still, you do it. Because someone has to. Because the court runs on illusion, and if you can keep the machine turning, maybe, you'll earn enough space to breathe. The poets begin again. They write verses about the resplendent queen, returned from sacred exile. They sketch you with halos, with books, with a single tear for dramatic effect. The songs make their rounds. In the streets people chant your name again. You're a symbol of dignity, of strength, of royal endurance. But none of it is real. You're not the woman in those songs. You're not a saint. You're just the same princess you were before the tower, before the convent, before your smile calcified into armour. Only now you know exactly how much of your story is being written without you. This brings us to another lovely academic debate. Whether noble women's lives were recorded accurately or rewritten posthumously into paragons of obedience and piety. Spoiler, the records were almost always adjusted. The version of you that will survive isn't the one bleeding in childbirth or locked in cold stone towers. It's the sainted, sanitized one, the useful one. So you begin your quiet rebellion. You commission your own scribe, not officially of course, a quiet man from the north with decent Latin and no loyalties. You tell him to write the truth, the ugly, mundane, frustrating truth. You dictate in the evenings, not a memoir, a correction. You give names, dates, what really happened, no embellishment, just you, laid bare in ink. It won't be published, you know that. It'll be hidden, discredited, maybe burned, but it will exist, and that's something. The court rolls on. Your son ascends in rank. Your husband grows older and quieter. You're granted a new chamber with a view of the rose garden. People come to you for advice now. Young noblewomen, mostly. They ask how you endured, how you kept your dignity. You tell them what no one told you. Dignity is just a better-fitting muzzle. You give them real advice too. When to speak. When to disappear. How to use embroidery as a distraction while listening to secret conversations. How to survive court life without being turned to marble. You become their legend whether you want it or not. The princess who endured, the queen who returned, and as much as you resent it, you also know the power in it. Legends, after all, can influence the living, even if they're built on half-truths. So you let them write their songs. Let them paint you in soft gold and reverence. but you keep the real story locked in your scribe's chest, tucked between candle wax and the warnings, because one day someone might need it. And maybe, just maybe, the next girl who inherits your smile won't have to wear it like a mask. The court grows quieter eventually. Not silent, never that. There are always footsteps, always whispers behind doors, always another feast to plan or alliance to stitch together with shaky diplomacy. But it changes. The people you knew begin to vanish, replaced by younger, sharper versions with newer names and newer eyes that look through you instead of at you. Your husband dies. Not dramatically, not tragically. Just slowly, the way old men do when their ambition runs out before their body does. One day he stops attending council, the next he stops eating, and then, just like that, he's gone. They bury him with the full honours of a king. You're dressed in black and praised for your stoicism. You weep exactly once in public, just enough to show devotion, not so much that it seems unseemly. Behind closed doors you feel complicated. Not grief exactly, not relief either. Just a dense, dull ache where something heavy used to live. You don't miss the man. You miss the version of yourself that once believed he could love you. After his death, you're called the Queen Dowager. It's a fancy term that mostly means the woman we keep in the background now. You're no longer a pawn in someone else's game, but you're not a player either. You're ceremonial, like the great tapestries in the throne room. Respected, polished, unnecessary, but you're still watching. You attend council meetings now as an honoured advisor. You sit near your son, now king, and offer opinions he may or may not pretend to hear. Your daughter is married off to a duke whose name she couldn't pronounce when she first heard it. She waved to you from the carriage window with a tight smile. You haven't heard from her since. People ask you sometimes if you're proud. Proud of your children, proud of the reign you stood beside, proud of your years of service. You always smile and say, "Of course." It's the only safe answer. But inside, you're proud of surviving, proud of not letting them break you, proud that even now, after all this, you're still here, still whole, if not entirely intact. You spend your days in your garden now. Not the grand rose one with marble benches and ornamental fountains. No, the smaller one behind your private chambers, the one no one else visits. You plant herbs and onions. Sometimes you kneel in the dirt, gloveless, feeling the soil pack under your nails. It's the only time you feel like a person instead of a portrait. There's no one to perform for, just bees and wind and the occasional blackbird who seems far too bold for its size. And in that quiet space, you start writing again. The scribe is gone. He died in a fire 2 winters ago, and his records were conveniently lost. But you still have your hands, and you still remember. So you take ink and parchment and begin again. Not for glory, not for revenge. Just so someone someday will understand what it meant to live inside a crown-shaped cage. You write about childbirth, about the cold walls of the tower, about the way women vanished without a sound, about the smile you wore for so long your jaw ached. You write about the games, the hunger, the loneliness, about the small victories that no bard would ever include in a song. And most importantly, you write about the truth no one likes to say out loud, that being a princess was never about beauty or gowns or noble blood. It was about survival, every single day. Because your body wasn't your own, your thoughts weren't yours to speak, your children weren't yours to raise, and even now, even in supposed freedom, there are limits. There are always limits. You think about the girls who'll come after you, the next generation of princesses, queens, noble daughters handed over like gift baskets with good breeding. You wonder if it will be different for them. If maybe, just maybe, the lines you're writing now will reach one of them someday. Not through official histories, but whispered by nursemaids, hidden in the margins of prayer books, sung by someone who hums when no one's listening. There's a fringe legend that sometimes makes its way through convents and courtyards. It's about a royal woman who faked her own death, escaped through the servant tunnels and lived the rest of her life as a healer in the countryside. No one knows her name, no one agrees on the details. But the idea of her is intoxicating. Not because she was free, but because she chose to be. You wonder if she was real. You wonder if she started the rumour herself. Historians will debate your life. They'll assign you motives. They'll frame your decisions as cunning or foolish, your silences as grace or cowardice. Men with titles and ink will decide whether you were beloved or merely tolerated. They'll publish books with your name on the spine and none of your words inside. And yet, when you look at the pages you've filled, hundreds now tucked in a locked chest beneath your bed, you feel something close to peace. Because you know the truth. You've spoken it, if only to paper. And that is more than most women like you ever get. The final time you're called to court, it's for a feast honouring your grandson's betrothal. He's young, eager, full of the same wide-eyed hope you remember wearing like a perfume. His bride-to-be sits across the table, smiling politely, hands trembling just slightly in her lap. You catch her eye once, just once, and in that moment, you offer her a different kind of blessing. Not in words, not in gesture, but in the look that says, I see you. I know what you're walking into. You are not alone. After the feast, you retreat to your chambers. You remove your jewellery slowly. You loosen your hair. You look in the mirror, and for the first time you don't see a princess. You see the woman beneath, the one who survived, the one who endured, the one they will never truly understand. You blow out the candle, not slowly, not ceremonially, just like that, and everything goes dark. And now, you lie back. The story is told, all of it. Not the polished version with golden crowns and gallant dances, but the raw one. The version etched in calluses and quiet resistance. In unsent letters and ink-stained fingers, in the silences that thundered louder than courtly applause. You've walked the corridors, sat through the feasts, felt the weight of brocade dresses that doubled as shackles. You've been raised on the promise of power and fed on the reality of performance. You've seen the princess fantasy for what it really was, a cage wrapped in silk. And maybe you feel a little differently now, the next time someone says they wanted to be a princess when they were young. Maybe you'll smile and say nothing, or maybe you'll nod and say, she probably didn't get much sleep. Because now you know better. You know the price of every gesture, every smile, every air. You know what it costs to be beautiful, obedient, endlessly polite. What it takes to sit still when you want to run, to nod when your heart screams, to survive when the world expects you to vanish gracefully. But tonight, you don't have to perform. You're not at court. No one's watching. There are no feast days to host, no alliances to arrange, no veil of respectability to pin back into place. It's just you now. You and the hush between dreams. So close your eyes, breathe in, slow and deep, exhale the throne, the tower, the politics. Let the royal halls crumble behind your eyelids. Let yourself be no one for a while. No princess, no queen. Just someone who made it through. And finally, rest.